Recording in progress.
Okay. Good morning, members, on this lovely sunny day.
Morning, Cheryl.
We're ready to start then. Good morning. My name is Councillor Cheryl Carlisle, and I'm the chair of the Finance and Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Can I welcome everyone to the meeting, which is a multi-location meeting. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live streaming fail, the meeting will continue and a recording will be available through the council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. Can I remind members that translation facilities are available, and for those attending remotely, to choose your language of choice. For those wishing to speak in the chamber, please raise your hand. For those attending remotely, please use the raised hand function. We will alternate between speakers in the chamber and remote attendees. For those attending remotely, please note that those in the chamber will be unable to use the chat facility, so please can you make the comments. Committee members who are attending remotely are required to leave their camera on throughout the debate and when voting in order to maintain the integrity of the decision-making process. If you do need to leave the meeting temporarily, pop a message in the chat function so the Democratic Services Officer is aware, and then let us know when you return. I expect everyone present and participating in this meeting to conduct themselves appropriately and be respectful to each other. That applies to members, officers, and anyone in the public gallery. When I open up the debate to members, I will ask committee members to speak and put their questions first, followed by non-committee members. Whilst I do not wish to stifle debate, can I remind members that any question should be focused on the subject matter and to avoid repetition. If I feel the length of individual speeches are negatively impacting on the overall time for discussion and becoming unmanageable, I will defer to the committee's rules of procedure, which limits the length of speeches to 5 minutes. Can I remind members that there is an exempt item, there are exempt items on the agenda today, and that you should be the only person in the room able to hear any confidential and exempt items being discussed. And during items 8 and 9, there are exempt pages. So if you wish to discuss this in particular details, then we'll discuss those in committee, but if not, then it will all be discussed in public, and we will be taking advice off our monitoring officer for that. And just to note, for item 8, development of the 3G pitch at Park Areas and notice of motion, I will be handing the chairing of this item to our Vice Chair, Councillor Dilwyn Roberts. Okay, so moving on to the agenda. First of all, I'm not sure, Leader, if you wanted to say a couple of words on the rack concrete issue, given the pressing nature of the concerns that are out there, where we're up to in Conway. It would be really helpful. Thanks. So hospital pass.
No, at this moment in time, work is ongoing, and I'll try and get some out to members as soon as possible, but it'd be premature of me to say something now. Cheryl, we will be meeting after this meeting, and we take it incredibly seriously, but I will get some of the members as soon as I have the factual information at hand. Great,
thank you very much, Leader. Okay, we'll start with item 1, apologies for absence.
No apologies, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Have we any declarations of interest, members? No. Okay, we move on to item 3, urgent matters. Not aware of any this morning. We move on to item 4, minutes of the Governance and Audit Committee. To receive for information the minutes of the Governance and Audit Committee held on 31st of July 2023, pages 4 to 8. Have we a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Stephen propose, and Councillor Dilwyn second. Could members show, please? And online, anyone against? No. Any abstentions? No. Thank you very much. Okay, we move on to item 5, questions to cabinet members. There are none. And we move on then, item 6A, establishment of office accommodation, part 2, project, pages 9 to 33. Councillor Charlie is going to introduce the report, and Blethen Evans, our county valuer and asset manager, will present the report. So, Leader, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is part of a process. We've already approved the outline business case for the accommodation office strategy in May and June in 2023. Clearly, this is a really vitally important piece of work. It's complex, but the changes we will make will impact on this council for many years to come. So it's absolutely right that we take it with the utmost seriousness, and the report clearly sets out how we'll propose to do that, Chair. So I'm happy to let our officers walk us through the report.
Thank you, Councillor Charlie. I'd like to bring Blethyn in, please. Morning, Blethyn.
Morning, Brother. So yeah, the report that you find before you is obviously a much shorter report than the reports that came before FROSC in May and then Cabinet in June. And I think it's fair to say they were kind of, well discussed and debated then. And the Democratic support then was for us to develop a full business case, which we will then bring back to democracy in early 2024. But obviously, in terms of taking that forward, we need to set up a project in developing the full business case, and in developing and taking forward that project board needs a nomination from FROSC as well for a member of Scrutiny to sit on that board. The report also seeks support for the addition of to the capital programme of the monies detailed in the outline business case in the order of £255,000, monies that will be required, to obviously develop the full business case in terms of external support required, internal fees that will need paying as well. So that's, I guess, a quick overview of the report. In terms of the recommendations are that FROSC obviously scrutinise the report, make a recommendation to Cabinet. Cabinet will sit next week, which is the 12th of September. So that's one of the recommendations. The other recommendation is that FROSC nominates a member to sit on the project board. So I'll keep it as short as that, Councillor Cheryl, and then obviously open to any questions, comments, clarifications from members of FROSC.
Thank you very much for that, Blethyn. Members, questions? Councillor Harry, first question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I don't know who would be best to answer this, but looking through the report, I noticed one of the drivers behind the one office strategy was having more staff effectively in working in Colwyn Bay and adding to a local economy there and increasing footfall. What I'd like to know, and I don't want to open a previous debate, but how do we square that with the drive towards hybrid working? It seems very much that we've adopted a policy to, put bluntly, move staff out of Coed Pellach, which would therefore ensure we have less staff there contributing to the economy in Colwyn Bay. And now we're saying we want to put more staff there to contribute to the economy locally. Not against the idea of consolidating our office stock and moving ahead with a business case for this at this stage, but I would like to know how those two competing policies actually overlap and come together.
Who's going to take this?
I can answer that. I guess in a nutshell, within the report that went to FROSC back in May and then Cabinet in June, in terms of the statistics that we had, there's sufficient capacity within Coed Pellach to absorb staff from Bodlondeb, more than enough. So I guess hence the driver for the one office strategy insofar as in terms of floor space, we've got enough floor space to host the amount of staff that we've got, working in an agile way. He only needs to kind of, look back in terms of the stats that we had for Bodlondeb in terms of the number of people there, which were pretty low. And then also the backlog maintenance and the revenue costs involved in running Bodlondeb. So I guess that would have been discussed and detailed in the report back in May and June. So yeah, and I've got nothing really more to add to it, to be honest, Councillor Harry. Whether that answers your question or not, yeah.
Well, not really. If we want to have staff working in Colwyn Bay, why have we got a policy where we encourage staff to work from home, which may not be in Colwyn Bay? It's not a difficult one.
We're not encouraging staff to work at home, are we?
Chief Exec is going to come in and answer that.
Yeah, and the point Blethyn just made, we're not encouraging staff to work exclusively from home. It is a hybrid working, which means there is office and home working. You have members of staff who will be full-time in the office. You will have members of staff who will be working on specific days. I think to answer your point, at the moment, we're spread over 2 offices, aren't we? So by consolidating the number of staff who are in the office at any given time in the office in Coed Pella, that should drive the numbers up in terms of usage of that building, which I hope would answer your question on that. We have to make better use of our estate, don't we? That's the bottom line. This will provide the information. So let's bear in mind that this is not a decision that we've made yet. We've got a business case that's coming through that will cover some of the matters that you're raising, Councillor Harry. So I'm not going to preempt anything, but you know, from the report that came earlier in the year, we know, as Bleddyn said, there's capacity in Coed Pella to encompass the numbers that we have in Bodlondeb, and that would mean that we would be able to utilise our estate in a more efficient way. So I think this will come out in the business case, won't it? A lot of this information, the facts behind whether it's worth it or not, on every aspect of this will come out in the business case. This report is setting up the group that will have control over that process. So, so I hope that at least answers some of your queries, Councillor Harry.
Content, Councillor Harry?
Not especially. I don't think I said that we exclusively ask staff to work from home. I think the chief exec read that word into my comments, but we can, I'm conscious the report today is about setting up that group, so we can perhaps come back to this at a later date.
Can I just correct? I think the words you used were we're encouraging people to work from home. That's not what we're doing. We're giving options in terms of a hybrid working model, which gives the ability to work agilely. So we're not encouraging people to work at home. We're making the working environment more agile. So I completely accept that you didn't say exclusively, Councillor Harry. I completely accept.
So sorry, I don't want to get into semantics here, but we're saying, you know, we want to make the option, give staff the option to work in an agile environment. I entirely understand that. Surely by giving them that option, you are encouraging them to do that. And one of the places they may work from is home. Aren't we?
Again, I don't want to get into the semantics of this either. It gives an option to people to work from home, but if there's a business need for them to be in the office, they're in the office. So, you know, I'll bring that conversation to an end now.
That's fine.
Don't you love Monday mornings? Okay, thank you both. Councillor Andrew next online. Thank you.
Morning, then. Morning, Chair.
Morning.
Thank you. Just very simply, I've been involved with Bleddyn with this since January, February this year, and with some of the members. Then we brought it to the reports in May and June for the committee to see. I just want to say that at the same time that we're already very, very sensitive for the work that's been done already, very sensitive to the local Conway members and, of course, the property itself. We're looking towards a one business strategy, but I would just I would say that the work that Bleddyn's done has been absolutely first class. In that last synopsis, around 200 pages, you won't get a better delve into what the future could be, including testing the water, as they say, for the various projects. So I'd like to thank Bleddyn on that behalf. Thank you very much. And to answer Councillor Harry, I would say, let's see, a lot of things have changed over the last couple of years, and I think a few things will change again. So let's just bide our time and see what actually this happens. Yeah, we need to move forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew. Next, Councillor Sean online, please.
Thank you. Just two little queries, really. One, when we were in the FROSC meeting last week, last week I think it was, that new projects were being put on hold or anything. I wondered if this money is already allocated or is it come on hold. I obviously don't understand the full workings. And the other one is my concern for Bodlondeb, obviously, as the ward member. And the reason my concern is because we've still got the civic hall still ongoing after all the years that it's been ongoing, and we still haven't got a decision on that. It hasn't come to a conclusion. It's gradually falling apart, and my worry is that Bodlondeb will go the same way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sean. Okay, the new project's on hold. Amanda, do you want to take that one?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. No, it's not currently in the capital programme. So effectively, this report is asking for approval or approval when it goes to Cabinet to add it into the capital programme with I think a recommendation that it's funded from our existing capital reserves. So in that context, assuming Cabinet approve it, then effectively it is being put as a priority for the council above other capital projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, man. Are you content with that that part of the answer, Councillor Sean?
Yes, thank you.
And the second, who's going to take the second questions around Bodlondeb and the Civic Hall?
I'll take I'll take that one. Yes, it is a risk. However, I guess there are two different animals in terms of the Civic Hall conduit and Bodlondeb. From a marketability or a commercial element, let alone the planning element as well. But obviously, we will be cognizant in terms of lessons learned from the Civic Hall experience, and obviously be very careful in how we deal with Bodlondeb, hopefully not to kind of repeat similar issues there, which are issues outside of our control, just mindful of the commercial market that we're working or operating in, plus the planning environment as well. But yeah, it's a fair comment, and as we'll take it on board as the project moves forward.
Thank you, Blethen. You content, Councillor Sean?
Well, not really, obviously, but yeah, I just needed to bring the subject up because I understand it's more commercially viable, obviously, and planning slightly different, but not really, because it's still in exactly the same ward with the castle and everything else that comes into it. The UNESCO, it's still there. I know it's slightly different because it's outside the town walls, but it still has exactly the same planning regulations will go against it, and the public as well. And we may well still encounter a lot of the same problems over the years, which obviously that deteriorates the building even more. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Sean. Before I go to Councillors Anne and Nigel, Councillor Paul and Gareth, were those particular questions on what Councillor Sean said, or are you too content to go on to the end of the?
Slight connection with mine. I was just going to ask if is there a place on the board for the local member in addition to the Frosk member, or is it no local? Is it going to somewhere basically? Yeah. Is there somewhere specific for the local member to be a member of the board, or is it just for a member of Frosk to be on the board?
Blethen, have you got the makeup of the board there?
The makeup of the board is in the report and in the project brief, and all we're asking is a nomination from Frosk. So there isn't a local member on the board. The members currently on the board or proposed to be on the board are the leader and then the cabinet member for finance, and then the third one would be, I said, the Frosk nomination. Whether there's a Conwy member that currently sits on Frosk, I don't know. But as I said, I think the proposal is there are three members. As I said, there's one kind of seat up for grabs.
Thank you, Blethen. Maybe we can discuss that aspect under the recommendations then when we get to the recommendations. I'll now move to Councillor Anne. Yes, Councillor Anne online, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, Shan got ahead of me there in terms I was going to ask the same question about the capital spend, because it is quite concerning that, week after a report where we're pausing any implementation of the existing capital programme, here we are proposing to add another £250,000 to it. So that is certainly something that's a bit of a concern to me in terms of a strategic approach to capital spending. But I do wonder, whilst obviously I support the setting up of this project board, is the timing right to determine on the £250,000 capital spend? Because we're doing so in a vacuum of other potential additional capital spend, and that's around the pressing need for overarching transformation across the whole of the council on the back of we can't afford to live within our means, and the fact that the peer group have recommended that we need to really put our heart and soul and roll our sleeves up into transformation. So I do wonder if we should be making a £250,000 spending commitment when actually this is part of a completely bigger picture. So that would be my first question. I'm not quite sure that, you know, a few months of delay until we get to grips where the direction of travel is with transformation is actually going to be that significant. So, you know, should we delay is my question. And then the second sort of question I've got, and really, I mean, it is to a degree on the back of, again, the meetings we've had in the last couple of weeks. And that's to do with exclusions. And I know we discussed this, but I make no apology from bringing it back up, because last week we had a projected budget shortfall of up to 30 million. And confirmation that at the end of Q1 of the current year, we're already projecting a £5 million overspend. Do we not need to be more radical in reducing our costs and overheads, which is what goes to the heart of the objectives of this particular project? I mean, Councillor Mike, whilst he was in the finance portfolio, did say these are eye-watering sums, i.e. up to £30 million. But don't we need action and not words? So, you know, why exclude, for example, the Market Street offices in Abergelly and whatever offices we've got in Park Areas? Are they not actually really close to Coed Pecla? So should we not consolidate these locality operations in Colwyn Bay and in Abergelly within Coed Pecla? Is that not the obvious thing to do? So 2 questions.
Thank you, Councillor Anne. I don't know, Leader, if you want to take the one on the capital spend and the transformation. Thank you.
So it's absolutely clear that we as a council are facing really difficult times. We have to therefore look to drive down our costs. So that is the main driver. This building, it's around up to about £500,000 a year. It's got a real backfall of work that needs to be spent on it. We have an opportunity to consolidate and drive those costs down. We could look to get a capital receipt from this building. The longer we delay doing that, the less of a saving there will be and the more the cost will be. In terms of the other buildings, you know, we are focusing on the big wins at the moment, but I take Anne's point that clearly we'd want to look to reduce our running costs wherever we could, but we also do not want to make sure that, you know, services are available in the areas where they're needed, but that will all be part of the process. And the points Councillor Shan makes about the need to find a really good viable use for this building in terms of the economy of the town is vitally important as well. And that's why we're setting up this board. That's why it's an extensive piece of work, because we need to get this right. But I don't think a delay is the right way. We have to do things differently, and sometimes you have to invest some money in order to make those long-term savings. And I'm confident that this is what's being proposed here. Thanks, Chair.
Chair, can I just come back on that?
Yes, you can, Councillor Anne.
I mean, I think Charlie and I are both in total agreement. We need to progress with this. My real question about delay is, given the fact that we're going to have to decide and determine a huge amount of extra money for transformation, surely we should delay this and rather than do it in silos, in little sort of parcels, should we not take a bigger, broader strategic approach to actually allocating the capital funding around transformation? And actually, what does a couple of months make of difference in terms of just delaying the decision on spend, not about the project board and setting up and starting its work? Because I would assume, although there's no detail within the report, that from the get-go, you don't on day one start to spend some money. So I just think we need prudence, and we need a bit of, you know, strategic thinking and action around spending money in the right way at the right time and in the right context, because we don't actually know the size of what cabinet is actually going to put in front of us and officers in terms of transformation across the council to live within our means. So yeah, I don't find my question sort of answered really. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Anne. Okay, we now move on.
No,
Councillor,
Chair, second part of my question was, should we be excluding the Abergele locality building, and should we be excluding the whatever existing commitment we've got within areas? Should we not be consolidating further, being more radical actually, and not ruling things out, but actually ruling them in because they're actually in quite close proximity to Coed Pecla?
Councillor Charlie Blethyn.
I can answer, yeah, Councillor Charlie, then I can pick up.
No, far ahead, Brendan, thanks.
In
Okay,
terms of,
Blethyn, please.
yeah, so in terms of rationale for excluding those properties that you listed there, Councillor Anne, they were in the report back in May and June. In terms of the Market Street offices in Abergele, that's not a Conwyd building, it's owned by the Health Board, and that's a locality hub in terms of social care workers working within that kind of a eastern area of the county. So it'd be very difficult, and I guess then there'll be kind of other costs if all of that would be then kind of lifted and shifted into Coed Pecla. In terms of the offices in Eires Park, again, that's a locality hub, again, shared with the Health Board. Again, that is, as I said, that's got a kind of a, it's a different feel altogether to Coed Pecla. In terms of the other assets that were listed back in the report back in May and June, Llystyfrig and Canolfan Crwst, again, we're on leases there, which have got years to run. Again, locality hubs. There's another office over in Llanfechan, Plas Menai, a locality hub. And in discussions with social care at the time, those offices needed to be in those localities. Whether social care's vision may change over time, it may then just be possibly another phase of office accommodation. But Councillor Charlie quite rightly pointed out in terms of, I think the prize is much greater if we focus in on Bodlondeb, just mindful of the backlog maintenance, mindful that we own it, mindful of the revenue costs there. And if we start making it too big an animal, as I said, we may just kind of lose sight on possibly optimizing the potential savings and, as I said, improving that working environment. But certainly something that could be looked at a later date, not too far a later date anyway. So yeah, sorry, my dog started barking as well as the post.
I'll bring the dog in next, don't worry, thank you. Councillor Anne, you content?
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Blythe. I mean, I must admit, I do understand the piece about leases as opposed to ownership, and really I'm just really anxious that we are ambitious to actually really reduce our number of properties, our headcount in terms of property, and indeed our running costs. So I completely sort of take your feedback on that. I'm less convinced overall in terms of what I've raised about the wisdom of making a £500,000 decision here when we could actually delay that until after October when we understand what the transformation proposal is. But that's just my personal view. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Anne. Now bringing Councillor Nigel, then Councillor Paul, and we're going to go to recommendations after that. Thank you. Councillor Nigel.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can you hear me?
I can indeed.
Excellent. Thank you very much and for allowing me to speak. Yeah, I mean, the office strategy policy, it's nothing new. It's something that we've been dealing with certainly for 8 years that I can remember that I've been a county councillor. When we purchased the old DHS offices in Colwyn Bay. We now have a spectacular Coed Pecla office there that accommodates our staff, bringing footfall into that fabulous town of Colwyn Bay, with our officers spending money locally, bolstering the economy there. It's a win-win. With the purchase of that property, I think we reduced our assets by about 14 buildings. I think we were able to sell off, which reduced our carbon footprint, no doubt, and our maintenance costs. And this is just another progression of that, is to look to the future. And to develop a business case is the way that you have to do it. It's a democratic process. And I see it as a spend to save. So we're spending this money to make sure that this is the right thing to do. The business case is correct. and that it fits with our focus and our vision for the future. So I fully support this. It's a progression, and it's the journey that we've been on for a number of years now, and I fully support it. If I could, Chair, I would like to move the recommendations, but I noticed at 2.2 you're looking for a nomination from the members of FROSC, and I'd like to nominate Councillor Andrew Wood, if I could. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nigel. We were going to have a discussion around local members, weren't we, before we went to the recommendations about that. But have we a second? Oh, yes, Chief Exec, thank you.
Yeah, on that point, Chair, I think as far as our structures are concerned, we would really invite local members to sit on boards. So I think you can take that as read, really, that we will be doing that. I was just looking at the structure document we've got, and if it affects an area specifically, we would invite local members anyway. So I think you can take that on board.
Excellent. Well, we shall deal with that during the recommendations then. So you've recommended Councillor Andrew Wood. Do we have a second for that before we go to Councillor Paul? Councillor Stephen. Lovely, thank you. Okay, last speaker, Councillor Paul in the chamber. Thank you.
Yeah, I raised this issue at the FROSC last week as well. Obviously, the one office strategy is fundamentally about productivity, making sure we are effective, and that's why I'm fully supportive of the recommendations. The most recent data said quite clearly public sector output is 5.7% lower than pre-pandemic times, and this compared to the private sector, which is 1.3% higher. So in a sense, this whole strategy needs to ensure that our productivity is improved. And I'm sure Blethyn's all over this and understands that, but that's what we need to have reassurance in when the one office strategy is finally implemented, because it's all about making sure we're more efficient and more effective than we are today. So I think as long as we note that all the way through this process, and I think the nomination of Andrew as the chair is important, because he chaired the task and finish group that's got us to this point anyway. So that's the logical route to take, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. And obviously now we've had the confirmation, Councillor Sean will be able to sit on the board as a local member. Oh, Councillor Gronwy?
You say a local member, this will affect not only Bud London, but also affects Colwyn Bay. So you're saying that we should have the local members from Colwyn Bay, which is 2 wards basically. So you could end up with 5 local members being on the board, which is a ridiculous number.
I think it's about respect. Councillor Sean has been very vocal about this as the local member for Conway. As it's
going to do with respect about having equality, isn't it? You talk about the effect on Conway, but there will be a significant effect on Colwyn Bay as well.
Reen, would you like to come in? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I accept the point, but I do think we're not. The proposal in respect to Colwyn Bay is increasing numbers within an existing office building. So that is different to dealing with this building, which, you know, the recommendation, the previous report was about a one office strategy. So that would mean that this building may close. So I think that could have a more of an effect. So therefore, I would consider that probably would be the reasoning behind the local members in Conway maybe having. But obviously, any consultation process would involve members from Colwyn as well, wouldn't it? So that would cover that element off. But I do accept the point that in terms of, we also need a workable group here, don't we? We have to have something that would move things forward as well. And you know, we could end up with a position where it would be a substantial board and therefore the reassurance, I guess, would be around that any decision would be through the democratic process. This is not a decision-making board, is it? It is to make recommendations that then flow through democracy. So hopefully that gives the reassurance to the remainder of the members.
Thank you very much for that, Reen. Councillor Sean, would you like to come back in?
Thank you for letting me come back in. I was just like to know if Councillor Ann is putting forward a proposal to recommend we delay this.
Chair, do you want me to come in?
I do, please, Councillor Ann.
Yeah, Sean, I am happy to do. I'm not to delay the setting up of the project board, so it can go ahead with this work as far as I'm concerned. But my concern is about committing the sum of £250,000 with no detail and in the light of a far bigger transformation project. So my proposal would be that we delay allocating the capital funding to this project until members are fully briefed on the peer review action plan and capital revenue funding requirements for transformation.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ann. Have we a seconder for that proposal?
I'd like to second that, please.
Thank you. Okay. So, Matt, here we go.
Chair, my suggestion will be we've essentially got 3 different proposals. My suggestion will be, do we deal with the nomination first, and then we can deal with in respect of 2.4. We have the proposition that's been seconded to delay that allocation of that funding. So perhaps we could take a vote on that recommendation first, and then deal with the endorsing the brief and the establishment of the project.
Okay, so we'll start with the member. We've had a proposal and a seconder for Councillor Andrew to be the Frosk representative on the board. So we're taking that now.
I think first, Chair, do we have any other nominations first in respect to the board member or
well, could I maybe just propose Councillor Sean as the local Conway member if it's limited to one position on the board?
I don't think we need to worry about that in terms of we can add to the brief that the local members are invited anyway. So it's obviously a matter for the committee if they want to nominate Councillor Shan, but the local members should be invited in any event to attend the board.
Shall we make that as part of our proposal then? Oh, Councillor Stephen.
Sorry, I'd just like clarification on Councillor Ann's proposal. Is she proposing that Sean is, as a member of FROST, be part of that project board, or is she proposing that she be a member of the ward?
I think I proposed as the local member, Stephen, so there would be an additional FROSC member as well, which is part of the original brief here. Thanks.
Yeah, as I said, the management structure document says that local members should be invited to be members of the board anyway. So we would add that so that the 2 Conway members would be automatically invited to be board members in addition to what's being proposed here. So the nomination we're seeking here now is the FROSC representative to be sitting on the board.
Okay, so just to be clear then, Rena, I'll withdraw that proposal, yeah, since it's no longer required. It's just that it wasn't within the brief, was it? It wasn't within the report.
Absolutely, Councillor Ann, completely agree, and it should have been there. So you're quite right to raise it, Councillor Ann, and rest assured that it will be included.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you both. So we will move to voting on that, whether Councillor Andrew is the representative from FROSC on the board. Could members show, please? 6 in the room, and how many online? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 online. 7. Should have gone to Specsavers. Okay. Anybody against that? And any abstentions? No, that's carried. Thank you. We now move on to.
Yeah, so we have a proposition in respect of the capital budget, which is that there's a recommendation to Cabinet to approve the addition of the capital budget to develop the full business case in the sum of 255,000, and we've had a proposition and a seconder that is delayed until there is further detail about that. Now, I'm not clear what detail we're talking about, but that was the proposition.
I think Blethin just wants to come in there from the officer perspective. Blethin, thank you.
Yeah, the detail was contained in the report back in May and June in terms of the £250,000. So the £250,000 is a sum of money required whereby we will need a property agent to start the soft market test and the marketing of Bodlondeb. We will need a planning agent to develop a planning brief for Bodlondeb. So we kind of put some form of due diligence pack together. We will need ERF consultancy. We will need external design consultants to work up draft proposals for Coed Petha. So there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done, that needs to be started now in order for us to kind of go to the project board for a strategic steer on various things. So I think I would just say in terms of the £250,000, I said it is basically for, I said work solely associated with either Bodlondeb or Coed Petha from gaining external support to undertake that work. And as I said, in terms of delaying, or for me not to have a budget to go and commission those people, as I said, it will delay progress. It will then delay the full business case going to democracy sometime in 2024, and we may end up with a project board that, as I said, in terms of discussion and in terms of strategic steer, may be kind of hamstrung by the fact that we're unable to progress certain things which need a budget against. So I just thought I'd add that in terms of context as well. So yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Blethin. Councillor Anne, do you want to come back?
Yeah, just to be clear, I mean, I don't disagree that this project board needs to be funded. But, this is a piece of scattergun approach rather than a strategic approach for me in terms of allocating capital funds. So, what I'm saying is in a couple of months' time, if not earlier, there's to be a brief for members on the peer review action plan, and a huge piece of that presumably is around transformation, because that's what the peer review group recommendations were really centred on in terms of living within our means. So my proposal, just to repeat it so I'm really clear, is just to delay for those couple of months the allocating of scarce capital funding of just over £250,000 until members are fully briefed on the peer review action plan and the capital and revenue funding requirements contained within the action plan for transformation. So it's about bigger picture. Let's make sure that we're actually allocating money in the right way, in the right amounts, and that it is actually affordable, which is part of our ongoing challenge. We keep coming up with loads of capital things and then we find we've overextended ourselves. So it's about, let's delay for a couple of months and then we can actually allocate the funding for the whole shenanigans. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Anne, for repeating your recommendation, and that was seconded by Councillor Sean. So we're going to deal with that now. So would members like to vote in favour of that, please? Online, 1, 2, 3, 4 online, 5 online. You've obviously got better glasses than me. And none in the room. Okay, so those against. How many online? 7 in total. And abstentions. I've got any, yeah, 2 abstentions. Thank you. So that is lost. Thank you for bringing that, Councillor Anne.
Yes, so essentially, Chair, we've got two recommendations, 2.3 and 2.4. That's the Cabinet endorses the brief and the establishment of the project, and there's a Cabinet approve the additions to capital funding of 255,000 to develop the full business case to be funded from capital reserves. Those are recommendations to Cabinet. Should anybody want to move them?
Option A.
Councillor Dilwyn has proposed.
Councillor
So
Paul.
Councillor Paul has seconded. And would members like to show in favour?
Chair, can we take these two proposals separately? Because I'm in favour of one and obviously against the other. So I want to be able to exercise my vote. Thanks.
Chair, we can take them separately, although Councillor Ann's proposal has been lost.
So we
So-
go with,
Do we have a proposer and second first then, Chair, for 2.3? Councillor Harry.
Yeah, I'm happy to propose 2.3, Chair.
you're
Thank you.
proposing 2.3. Thank you, Councillor
got a
Harry.
second as well.
And second, thank you, Councillor Neer. So would members like to show on 2.3? Let's be clear. 2, 3, 6 in the room. 1, 2, 3. 6 online, so that's 12, 4. Any against? Any abstentions? No, so 2.3 is carried, thank you. And we now go to 2.4.
Just confirm, do we have a proposer and a proposer for 2.4? Do we have a proposer
Proposer for 2.4.
and a
Is that
second?
Councillor Nigel?
And a seconder. There we are.
So Councillor Nigel has proposed, and who's seconded?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Okay, can we show on that on 2.4, please? 4 in the room. 1, 2, 3. 3 online. 4 in the room, 3 online. That's 7. Those against, please. 1, 2, 3. 3 online. 4 online. Against. Any abstentions?
Yeah, I think you miscounted those in favour because Councillor Chris had his digital hand up.
No, no.
That's correct. In any event, Chair, it wouldn't make any difference to the outcome, which is the.
Stick your microphone on. Sorry, Matt, if you could just.
I don't think we did make an error, but nonetheless, that wouldn't make a difference to the outcome. It's been carried, Chair.
Thank you. So we now, yes, where are we up to with the counting for that one? 2.4. That's carried now. Okay.
So can we just have the vote? Can we just have the vote, Chair, please, in terms of what the result was?
Yeah, 7-4, 2 abstention, Chair.
Thank you very much. 7, 4 and 2 abstentions. Okay, so that's carried. Well, thank you very much, Blethyn, for that report. Thank you, members, for your comments. We now move on to item 7A, levelling up funds overview, pages 34 to 42. Councillor Charlie, the leader, will introduce the report, and Sarah Ecob, Head of Economy and Culture, will present the report. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, once again. So this is following a request from Scrutiny to have an update as to the timeline and key information regarding the submissions we put in for the Levelling Up Fund. Before I start, I'd like to thank my predecessor, Councillor Louise, who held this portfolio up until May 22. She put a huge amount of work into bringing these projects forward, and both our MPs were also very, very supportive and very helpful in doing so. Members will be aware that we had one successful bid, which is the Coast to Valley Transport, and the other 2 were unsuccessful. In pointing that out, I should note, however, that across the whole of round 1 and round 2, there were only 216 out of 834 bids that were actually approved. So that's around a quarter of bids that were submitted were successful, and that no local authority had more than one successful bid. We even have instances, Flint being one of the nearest ones, where they had no successful bids whatsoever. So I think our officers should be congratulated on the fact that we have had one successful bid. I think members will want to know a bit more about the decision to submit our bid independently of Denbighshire. So in the initial round one, where there was a shared constituency, you had to work with another council, and that it was capped at £10 million each. In round two, it was announced that there was a change that you could go independent bids and you could go up for 20 million. So I think there's three real reasons why we decided to do that. In the first instance, if that had been available in round one, I think we would have done it right from the off. Clearly, it's simpler to work in-house rather than have to work with another organisation, as well as we get on with our colleagues in Denbighshire. And secondly, it became very clear very early that the actual cost envelope to do something substantial and transformational to the stadium was way in excess of the 10 million. In fact, it was double that. So there was an opportunity to make some real meaningful change there. And I think the third really important point was that within the bids, there had to be a real clear link between the two schemes. If you're doing a cross authority scheme, we didn't see any link between what happened in the south of Denbighshire, which is essentially a heritage bid, as opposed to ours, which was trying to create sort of more professional sports facilities for North Wales. So I'll leave it there, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions after the.
Thank you, Councillor Charlie. Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Charlie has covered most of what I would say, but this is a report with a timeline of the levelling up funds and what we did, and the thought process into it, as Councillor Charlie has said. So just some key points. In March 2021, the levelling up funding was announced in the budget with the deadline of June 2021 for the first round. We didn't have any off the shelf projects ready to go. So we started at that point thinking and working towards what we would want to put forwards. And as you will see from the report, there was lots of conversations and discussion and back and forwards around what projects we should submit. In March 2022, round two was announced with the deadline of July. That did extend slightly, but again, really, really tight deadlines compared to what we're used to working towards for large scale projects of this kind. We were able to put in 3 bids in total. The bids were related to the number of MPs in the area plus 1 transport bid. So 2 bids plus transport bid for us. In round 2, we did therefore submit our 3 bids: Clwyd West, Aberconwy, and the transport scheme, which was Coast to Valley. So overall in round 2, 11 grants were awarded in Wales. 5 of those were transport bids. So we were absolutely delighted that we were successful with one of our bids, and there were only 3 successful applications in North Wales. We were awarded 18.6 million for our Coast to Valley transport project, and ERF colleagues are working on that and reporting separately on that. The feedback we received regarding Clwyd West and Aberconwy was positive and constructive. The areas that we need to work on were very much reflective of the short lead time that we had to pull these bids together. And certainly we will be looking at those, and we have been looking at those, so that should further funding come forwards, we will be in a position to go forwards should members want us to. When we went for the round 2 bids, we had initially been told that there would be 3 rounds, and we were then informed that round 3 was not a certainty. And we got various bits of information, but it was clear that we may not be able to submit in round 3, which is why we pulled all 3 bids together in round 2, which was a huge, huge task for the officers concerned. We are aware that round 3 is still being discussed. There are no details yet, there is no timeline, but hopefully there will be a round 3. We do not know if we will be able to submit any bids for this. It may be that this is ring-fenced to certain areas or details. For round 1 and round 2, all spend needs to be made by the end of 2024. So clearly there's a very short timeline to spend the levelling up funding that we have. and I'm sure the guidelines will come out for round 3 shortly. So I think those are the key highlights, along with what the leader has already said, and obviously happy to take any questions. Diolch.
Thank you very much for that, Sarah. Questions, members? Councillor Paul.
Just a very practical one, with the expenditure having to be completed by the end of 2024. When are we hoping for the contractors for the coast of the valley route to be on site? I know we're going to get further reports from me and ERF on that, but presumably with such tight limits, we should have some indication when this is, as I say, when we've got contractors on site to do the work.
Thank you for that very pertinent question, Councillor. Sarah? Oh.
I apologise. I am not involved with that project. I'm not sure if anybody else in the room would be able to answer that, and if not, obviously we will come back to you with that, Councillor Paul.
Andy, you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Paul. The Levelling Up Transport Funding Programme is a 3-year programme. So the the end of expenditure must be March 2026. So we always knew that this first year would be about design, planning, looking at various options before coming up with the final design, planning applications, landowner permissions, etc. So that's what we're working on at the moment.
That's really helpful.
Content, Councillor Paul. Thank you, Andy. Councillor Harry, then Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's a question for Sarah, first of all. So, Sarah, I think in your presentation you said that initially there'd been a plan to put the Clwyd West bid in for round 2. This council would receive some sort of advice or information that there may not be a round 3, or we may not be eligible for round 3. And therefore, that was what prompted the decision to put the Aberconway constituency bid in for round 2 as well. Is that correct?
Yes, Councillor Harry. We didn't have firm guidance on whether there would be a round 3. So that is why we decided to put all 3 bids in together in round 2.
Okay, and that decision, I appreciate there will have been work in the background, but that decision formally was taken by Cabinet on the 14th of June 2022, correct?
I believe so. I have put all of the timeline in the report. I'm just scrolling through, but if you have that in front of you, yes, what I've written in the report is correct. Well,
yeah. I would just then like to understand why in that case we had Jane Richardson, the former Strategic Director for Economy and Place, come to our local area forum North, which covers Llandudno, provide an update at the time on the Aberconway bid. As I recall, Jane was very clear that there were concerns about the maturity of the bid. Those are reflected in the minutes of that local area forum, which in turn will have come to Economy and Place. As I recall it in the meeting, Jane said that she didn't think that the bid would get through round 2, but it's going to be submitted anyway, see what the feedback says, and then look to submit it in round 3. And the minutes of that local area forum say it would be submitted in round 3, albeit with the caveat if available. But isn't it a bit strange if you and your colleagues and if Cabinet were of the opinion that we probably wouldn't be able to submit in round 3, that Strategic Director came and told the councillors who represented the ward where this particular project would be based that there was an aspiration to submit it in round 3, even if you understood that was highly unlikely?
One of the things that we had been told was that there was a possibility that the round 3 bids would only be available to bids that had already been submitted and had had feedback. So I think that's what Jane was referring to. It was very, I have to say, it was very confusing, and the goalposts did keep moving. We did not have clarity. But we had, one of the things that we had been told was there is a possibility that round 3 might only be for previous submitted bid.
Okay, that is really helpful, and I'd say I think that's the first time that I've heard that feedback. I'm conscious in the times this has been raised in this chamber, a number of people have raised concerns about advice or information that's been given. I'm not sure that many members have actually seen much of this advice in writing, so I wonder if after this meeting, if written advice that's been received in respect for bids could be shared, even if it's confidential, even if it's just with local members, if that information could be shared so we can actually have some certainty as to where we stand with this.
Yeah, unfortunately, Councillor Harry, we were not able to get written advice. I will go back and find out if there was any written advice, but the process with getting information from UK government for the levelling up bids has been quite difficult. There's been changes, and whenever we've asked for advice, we still have nothing on round 3. There are some, we've just started getting some invitations for website, for online events to talk about what to do for submitting to round 3. But we have not had anything formal from UK government, and we have regular conversations with the team, but unfortunately there was nothing written at any time that I'm aware of. I will go back to the team and ask at what stage did we get the formal notifications, but generally it was when the 2 budget announcements were made that was the first kind of formal announcement, and then the news on what comes next has been sporadic and changing and not being written down.
Councillor Harry.
I think we'll perhaps leave that point there. I think it's surprising that we're making decisions on really significant regeneration projects based on advice, and you'd then be told that we haven't actually had it formally. It seems a bit bizarre to me, frankly. If I could ask one question quickly, furthermore, and hopefully this is probably a simpler question. I'm looking at paragraph 1.6 in the report, where it says that feedback from the applications will be taken on board and that these projects will be put forward for potentially other grant funding if needed, as and when that becomes available. Have any other potential grant funding schemes of the same size been identified that could replace the levelling up grant process, particularly in respect of the Aberconway constituency bid?
No, they have not been identified, certainly not for the full packages that we've put forward. So we are looking at potential for smaller funding bids. So for example, through shared prosperity funding, we have been awarded some money towards some of the events infrastructure that was included in the Aberconway bid. But at the moment, there aren't any large scale funding packages around that could replace for the entirety of the bids we put forwards.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harry. Councillor Paul, I've got councillors.
Can I just come in on this issue, because otherwise we'll do.
Yeah, yes, Councillor Gronwood just popped his hand up on this issue. So briefly, both of you, and then.
Yeah, I would just like to congratulate Andrew and his team on the work they've done with the Coast to Valley project. That was the one that was approved, and the work is well underway in developing that project. The only comment I would make about the levelling up funding, this was a shambolic announcement by UK government, a pot of money that was identified, very little guidance with it. It was announced that bids had to be in with a matter of months, and then they kept on moving the goalposts. So I would like to thank the officers for all the work they've done in preparing bids in what has been a specifically difficult way of applying for grant funding. They create an awful lot of work for officers and very little sanity around that grant funding. I think we should be wary when government comes up with pots of money without clear deadlines and clear outlines of what is expected to be delivered.
Thank you, Councillor Gronwood. Councillor Paul, briefly, thank you.
Councillor Harries knows I'm going to say this. If he wants us to receive written advice from UK government, he needs to lobby his local Conservative MPs to get the UK government to give us the written advice. It's very simple.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Councillor Harry, did you want to come back on that?
I'll come back on that very briefly. Yes. And I think Paul possibly knows what I'm going to say. And I'm sure there will have been a lot of advice around the levelling up bids. However, the feedback in respect of the Aberconway bit is the bit I will touch on. Now, I've repeatedly asked if we can have updates from this council on the bid process so we can be, as Scrutiny, updated. I've asked for those twice in slightly over a year. This is the first time we're discussing it in Scrutiny. I did ask for an update to come to the local area forum North. The response that I had was that the chief exec and the leader wouldn't attend because this council hadn't received any feedback, so had nothing to discuss. I actually contacted the relevant government department and they confirmed that this council had had the feedback. So perhaps some clarity around that would be helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Harry. Reen?
Thank you, Councillor Harry. And I think you've raised this before, and I think we've responded before. I think in respect of the timing of those meetings, there was a couple of weeks window where you will appreciate the document we received in terms of feedback needed to be considered internally before anything else. So it was premature to be going to any meeting to discuss that feedback at that time. And I think what we did was reasonable. We have a report here. We are able to bring you a report here that encompasses everything that needs to be done, was done in respect of levelling up, including, as you've already heard, the shifting position that we found ourselves as officers at the time trying to make decisions when things were changing. And to be fair, I'd echo the thanks I'd like to give to the officers concerned. It was a very short window of time they had to do this work. And to be fair, the level of bids that were put in were fantastic in those circumstances. And we will take on board the detail that's been provided by the team in terms of any future bid process. But I think what jumps out at that feedback is, had we had more time to prepare those bids, they would have been stronger. And therefore, I don't take that as a criticism of the officers' work. To be honest, they miracles were undertaken in that really short period of time. So I accept that Councillor Harry has asked for an update, but to be fair, I think this is the relevant time because we have all the information now, apart from round 3. And that is the information that we need. But I would give a little bit of caution on round 3. We've heard already around the pressure we have on our capital programme. Every single bid requires 10% match funding. And we are in a very different place now than we were 12 to 18 months ago in terms of our ability to match with our funds. So I would put that caveat in there. Any opening, if there will be, we'll have to have that in the back of our minds.
Very briefly, Councillor Harry, and then
it is a very brief point. Look, I don't want to monopolise the debate, but just to pick up the point the chief exec made about the capital allocation for match funding, and I think it's an important point. I know it has been raised here. The main private stakeholder involved in the Aberconway bid has offered to work with this council to see if they can provide through one mechanism or another some or all of the funding that would be required to provide that match, and that has been communicated in writing to the leader. So totally understand that there may be some challenges, but I just want to be very clear that that cannot be held up as a roadblock to this, and it is something that we may have solutions to work around.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Harry. We've got Councillors Gareth, Nigel and Ant, then we are moving to the recommendations. Councillor Gareth.
Thanks. Just a couple of questions from me. There was a report came out, I think, last week saying that the active travel, a Wales-wide report, that the active travel hasn't actually seen any increase in walking and that the cycling is about the same before they put all the spend into active travel. Just wondered if there was any implications in that with our spend on the active travel scheme. Is there any learnings? Are we going to have to change it or tweak it? And my second question relates to 3.7 in the report. In the long list, it alludes to expenditure on the 3 paddling pools. And I just wondered, is that the work that we've now actually doing at the moment? on the 3 pools that we've actually found funding from elsewhere to do the work, or was that referring to other work that was planned and other schemes that was planned for the pools?
Andy, would you like to take this? Thank you.
Yeah, with regards to the question about increasing active travel use, clearly that's a long-term aim, and building infrastructure is just part of a package of things that we need to do to increase active travel use. That it doesn't affect the specific projects that we're working on. They will all have sort of baseline usage monitoring taken before the projects are built, and then for a period of time after the projects are built. But we completely believe in the Moor Mynydd Coast to Valley scheme, that it will be a benefit to the community and increase cycling and walking in the Conwy Valley.
Thank you, Andrew. And your second question, Sarah, if you'd like to answer the second part.
Yes, thank you. So it did include some of that work, and because we knew it was there was a lot of urgent work that needed undertaking, we were also seeking funding elsewhere. We were looking wherever we could, so we had included that. I think I don't think there was additional work for that. I'd have to just go back and check, but I think there was exactly the work that we've done now, and we've been able to source other funding, thankfully, for making sure that the paddling pools are fully refurbished and safe and protected for the coming years for our citizens and for the people coming in as tourists into the county. Thank you.
Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, thanks. I just wondered if there was a bigger scheme initially thought of or anything, but yeah, answer's plain.
Thank you both. Councillor Nigel, then Councillor Anne and Dilwyn.
Thank you, Chair. To be honest, I just want to say I find it really disappointing, the comments coming from the opposition member, trying to find fault here in a team of officers that, as I want to echo the Chief Executive words here, have worked a miracle. I see this nothing less than a success story. We've already heard the leader say that we put 3 schemes forward, one of which was successful, a 33% success rate. The average UK was a 25% success rate. Denbighshire only got 10.9 million. We got 18.6 million. This is great news. It's fantastic. And our officers were under extreme pressure because of this cobbled together levelling up funding, where the goalposts kept shifting. Information was poor. But despite that, I see it nothing less than a great success. And
Councillor Nigel.
I'm aghast really with Harry's comments. But there we go. I'd like to move the recommendation that we note this report. I think it shows how good our officers are and the skilled teams that we have, which are obviously headed by Sarah. And I'm very, very happy. Thank you.
I'm glad you're very happy, Councillor Nigel. That's what we like on a Monday morning. Councillor Anne and then Dilwyn.
Couple of points, Chair, thanks. I mean, Councillor Gareth has brought up the paddling pools. You might be expecting me to ask for, well, what the devil's happening with them. I'm not going to ask that question now, but I would ask the leader and Sarah if they would write particularly, not to all members, but particularly to those members in whose wards these paddling pools have been an absolutely catastrophe and sort of a public sort of humiliation, really. I mean, I think it's probably been about, I don't know, 6-8 weeks ago, if not longer, since I found out direct from source in terms of what was happening with the paddling pools, and obviously 6-8 weeks later I haven't a Scooby-Doo in terms of what's holding up completion, when completion will be, and so on. So I would actually ask the leader and Sarah to put the heads together and give members and indeed the public an update on where it's going. Obviously this week the schools are back, and you know that has been a real own goal in terms of not completing the paddling pools and opening them while the kids were off school. So I just asked for a report. But back to this report, my sort of, I understand that, you know, these bids were coming at with little information, very short timescales, and obviously we're about attracting significant amounts of investment. So you know what we've achieved is great. And obviously we've talked here about the learning, but I wonder what learning is there around the prioritisation process, because I can see within the report, and it's been mentioned, we're looking at a Great Orme Visitor Centre and yet more investment in Venue Cymru. And I don't understand where that prioritisation has come from, because obviously this is quite a widespread geographical council with rurality as well as coastal communities, and obviously remote east and west outliers. And I don't understand my opportunity to be involved in the prioritisation process. I understand that there will have been reports gone to Economy in Place, but that's about the projects that were being put forward. So my question is, how do we involve scrutiny and wider membership in the prioritisation process? And actually, could we have a database, evidence-based priorities options, so that, you know, off the shelf or on the shelf projects are there, and actually we've had input into what we actually want to see happen across our county. I think that's really important, and that's a big piece that I've taken from this report. I don't feel included in the process. In fact, I don't even understand what the prioritisation process is. So thanks, Chair.
Thank you for those points, Councillor Anne. Oh, Councillor Adam, do you want to respond to that?
Just on the paddling pools, thank you, Chair. Yes, we are investing in the county's 4 paddling pools, and Sarah and I will try and meet with local members, hopefully this week or at least next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron. Could I have an answer about prioritisation as well, Chair?
Yes, you could. Who's good? Councillor Charlie, are you going to answer?
Yeah, and you make a very valid point. I mean, we've commented on how tight the time scales were for these applications. It was a whole new funding source. It was just thrown out there and you had to put your bids in. There's 600 odd bids which have failed. That's a considerable amount of public money where people have worked bids up at pace and scale to kind of deliver. So that's a real concern. If you look at 3.27, it talks about previous funding schemes, which was more an expression of interest, and you could work with the funder and you had time to actually bring forward something that would be more meaningful. You have more time to spend the money. So I absolutely hope they do look at this again, or whoever's bringing forward replacements for European funding. It needs to be done better, and it needs to be on a longer time scale, so you can make meaningful change and involve local members and make sure there is that distribution throughout the council. But when you're working the deadlines as tight as these, that's not possible. And again, like everybody else, I'd absolutely like to add my thanks to our officers who were successful. There's many places where there's no investment at all. So thank you.
Thanks, Leader. Sarah, do you want to come back in briefly before we go to
very briefly, just to add to the complications of this this particular strand of funding. We had to get the MPs to agree to our funding bids. So we had, as I mentioned in the report, we had to have lots of conversations with both Robin Miller and David Jones around what they would like to see within the bid. So it was a slightly different process than one that we would normally undertake. And as I mentioned in the report, we did do a long list, which then came through democracy, I think, as the short list in the end. But I hear what Councillor Anne is saying as well.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Last, Councillor Dilwyn, before we move to the recommendations.
Excuse me, sorry. Can someone tell Councillor Dillon to move his mic closer to his mouth, because I can't hear him? Thank you. I'd just like to take this opportunity to congratulate everyone who was involved in this, because this work is absolutely amazing in a short amount of time. It wasn't anything to do with me, but I do have one question, a quick one. As I congratulate you, Andrew, I'd also like to ask, did you say that there would be a meeting with the public of the Bettws-y-Coed area in the future? Do you know when this will be? Thank you.
Diolch Cynghorwyr Dilwyn. Bydd 'na gyfarfod efo Parc Genedlaethol Eryri ar y 19fed o mis Medi.
No translation, so.
Yes, it will be on the 18th of September.
That's my big moment.
Well done, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah. So there's a meeting with the National Park on the 18th of this month. We're following that with a briefing for local members on the 28th, which I think you've been invited to, and then we'll see what comes out of that meeting with the National Park, and then hopefully we'll be in October. We'll have a meeting in Bettws-y-Coed to brief people on progress.
Diolch, Andrew. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for all those questions, and thanks again to Sarah and the team and Andrew and the team for all they've been doing. We will now move to, we've had a proposal from Councillor Nigel 2.1 that we note the decision. Have we a seconder for that, please? Councillor Stephen. Okay, could we all members show, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And online. Get this right, gentlemen. 1, 2, 8 and 6 in the room, 8 on a line. Anybody against? Anyone abstain? No, that's carried. Thank you very much indeed. £5 in the chair's charity there, Andrew. Okay. We now, let's have a little look here. We now move, as per my previous comments, I'll now hand over the chair to Councillor Dilwyn for this next item, the development of 3G pitch at Park Areas and notice of motion. I'm doing this because I was involved in the questions to full council on the 27th and wish to take full part in this debate. So thank you very much, Councillor Dilwyn.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is an important matter. I'm not sure who's coming in to discuss this. I think it might be you, Aaron, that's going to present this. I'll hand it over to you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dilwyn. It's nice to see you in the chair as well.
I'm going to take us through this report, and I'll be focusing on the 3G pitch itself before handing over to Amanda, Strategic Director, who will take us through the decision-making process. And then, Chair, we'll open up to the floor. So the grass pitch at Stadium CSM has been replaced with a state-of-the-art 3G pitch. The former grass pitch only allowed for around 10 hours of use per week, of which RGC took up most, if not all, of this allocated time. The 3G pitch will now allow us to have more sporting and music events on site, as well as additional opportunities for the local community and local groups to use. And this is really important, in my opinion. As you can see from 1.7 in the report, the Welsh Rugby Union have expressed their delight with the new pitch following the first RGC game on the 12th of August. The North Wales Crusaders, the local rugby league team, who are now also based at Stadium CSM, have played their first match on the 27th of August, which I'm delighted to report was a resounding 62-20 win against the London Scholars. The business case that was reported by members last year is a spend to save business case. The 3G pitch will require less maintenance and will generate additional income for the service from increased use of the facility. Therefore, there is no additional burden on the council's revenue budget or to our residents or to the taxpayer. The pitch is to be paid for by the additional revenue raised and the savings made due to less maintenance. Not only does this not impose a burden on the council's revenue budget, it will in fact generate savings of at least £300,000 over the lifetime of the asset. This will certainly support the leisure service budget and the whole of the economy and culture service going forward. I'd also like to highlight here that the council were very fortunate in receiving a £110,000 grant, which is not to be paid back, from the Welsh Rugby Union. And I'd like to thank the WRU for this very generous grant, which I believe is the largest grant the union has ever awarded any organisation. The new 3G pitch at Stadium CSM will allow us to host and promote elite rugby in conjunction with the WRU. In doing so, this allows for professional training camps and matches and the promotion and expansion of the women's game. And I'm delighted to announce that the international matches are to return to Stadium CSM. At the end of this month, the stadium will host Wales women versus USA women, and tickets are now available at the box office. As I've already mentioned, the business case that was approved by members last year demonstrates that the new 3G pitch will generate savings of at least £300,000 over the lifetime of the asset, and there is no additional burden on our revenue budget. It's important to recognise that the decisions taken over recent years to invest in leisure facilities has directly led to increased Fit Conwy membership. Not only does this generate additional income for the council, it also helps us to achieve our corporate priority of keeping the people of Conwy active and healthy. Our Fit Conwy membership has well surpassed pre-pandemic levels, and we have more Fit Conwy members now than ever before. And I'd like to thank the Principal Leisure Manager, Molly Tidswell, and Sarah Acup, Head of Service, and their excellent team for all their hard work. We must remember that this great achievement has been reached despite the budget pressures faced by us and the public. I'm now going to hand over to Amanda to take us through the decision-making process. Diolch.
Yes, so just to confirm then the decision-making process. So I'll just go back slightly to the extent of talking about the levelling up bid, because obviously it was in that context. So prior to the decision or effectively the change in the rules on the levelling up, which allowed our bid to be, our Clwyd West bid to be changed from that 10 million bid to that 20 million bid. So aside and away from that, we were already, or leisure services were already in discussion with the Welsh Rugby Union about the development of the 3G pitch there, because you'll see actually in the quote later on in the report from the Welsh Rugby Union, they were actually starting to move away from areas because the facility wasn't in good condition and wasn't that usable for them, and actually so therefore a discussion had already started with them about getting a state-of-the-art pitch, elite sport pitch in Colwyn Bay to allow them to obviously stay and develop, as well as bringing those community benefits to us as an authority. So that was already going on alongside. We then had the scenario where our levelling up bid was going to change, so we were going to submit this bigger bid, and therefore that required us to provide that additional match from the £1 million to match the 10 or the 9 million in the first bit to effectively 2 million being required for the 20 million. So in a way, it worked out conveniently in that sense that we had a scheme which was allied to the development that we were proposing for the levelling up bid in the 3G pitch to, in a way, create that match then for that extra £1 million without us therefore having to identify more funding, because we already had that scheme there. And the other bit was the running track, where we already had within the capital budget, there was already 250,000 set aside for the running track. So the development of the 3G pitch and the running track capital budget that was already existed effectively created the match for the bid. Because effectively we were adding £1 million of our funding into the levelling up bid, that obviously required then a council decision. As you're fully aware, the Constitution says that any addition to the capital programme where it's effectively requiring our funds to be matched or our funds to be provided, anything above £500,000 is a council decision. So a report was brought to council on the 14th of July to seek the addition to the capital budget, which brought in the 3G pitch scheme into the capital budget with an identified funding, which was effectively that investor save funding of supported borrowing, which could be funded through reduced maintenance cost and increased income. The business case to support that self-financing of the 3G pitch was set out in that council report in paragraph 3.7, and effectively the resolution there on the back of that council meeting, the resolution was to add the athletics track, the 3G athletics track, with its source of funding being supported borrowing, adding that to the capital programme, and therefore the decision effectively gave lawful authority for officers to continue with that scheme because it was added to the programme on the back of a supported business case, and the funding was identified. I appreciate it was connected to the levelling up bid, but the important thing in that was that the Arias Park pitch and the athletics track were not contingent on the success of the levelling up bid, i.e. the funding was already identified. The funding did not require the grant, the external grant. It required the self-financing supported borrowing, and in the case of the athletics track, it was already in the capital programme. So the authority, therefore, to continue with the scheme from the officer's point of view was legitimate and made on that decision at that council meeting on the 14th of July. And I certainly, as a Section 151 officer, and I've consulted with the monitoring officer, and we are both comfortable that the correct process was followed, and the decision on the 14th of July gave officers that lawful authority, because the track was added into the capital budget at that point with a funding source identified and approved by council. Thank you. Just to add, my apology, just further, actually, just going on to the business case and not to take away from what Concur Aaron has already said, but I would also just critically point out, I think it's useful to say that the maintenance budget, the reduction in the maintenance budget and the increased income could not have happened without the new pitch. In other words, the reason I make that point is that money couldn't have been diverted elsewhere to support other spending within the council budget, and I think that's critical to point out, because effectively it demonstrates ultimately the absolute validity of the business case, because the savings generated and the additional income generated effectively can only happen as a result of the installation of the pitch, and I just want to make that as an additional critical point. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr iawn i'r ddau
Can I thank you both for your presentations. And that has explained a lot of things for us. Thank you. Councillor Cheryl.
Councillor Dilwyn. And thank you very much to Councillor Aaron and Amanda for that. Unfortunately, this report has not answered the questions, this report before us, not answered the questions I raised in council on the 27th of July regarding transparent governance, financial due diligence and transparent democracy. I've got 5 questions. It would have been helpful if the 5 questions I put during that council meeting that was deferred. It would have been really helpful if those 5 questions had been in the report, but I will reiterate them in a more simplified manner for today. My first question, Councillor Aaron, where is the spend to save business case you rely so heavily on? Where is your costs evaluations? Where is this is where the interest is going to be, this is how much we're going to have for the pitch? Where are all those figures saying how much, you know, your maintenance contracts? Where is that spend to save business case you talk about repeatedly? If you could answer.
Do you want to respond to that, either of you now? We'll take each point one by one.
Yes, it was presented to council in July last year, and it's in the appendix for this report.
No, the internal document, or the document should have come to scrutiny, laying out all your finances regarding this, what you're currently paying, what you intend to pay in the future, where all the additional incomes from, a proper spend to save business case, because you talk about it all the time. That was just a large general business case you put forward, didn't have any figures in whatsoever. So I'm asking you, where is the case that you presented that you based all your recommendations on? So thank you.
Amanda, do you want to come in?
Yeah, the business case was set out in the council report. I appreciate it wasn't set out in the level of detail that you're referring to there, Councillor Cheryl. But I would say that there are lots of business cases that come to in front of the council where decisions are taken which do not have the depth of detail you were talking about. We just earlier on this morning, there was a business case for £250,000 to support the OAS project. You know, the detail you've just referenced wasn't included in that. There's nothing in our constitution that sets out that you know, a lengthy several page document needs to come. The business case in terms of it demonstrating that it was a spend to save with reduced maintenance costs and increased income, which was questioned at full council at the time, and the vote was unanimous to support that. So you know, there's nothing in the constitution that requires a lengthy document to come to scrutiny. The business case in terms of the justification for it was in the council report.
Yeah, I absolutely get that, Amanda. Yeah, it's where is your document with all these figures? Where is that?
Well, the appendix attached to the report today gives you all of that detail. The business case, obviously, I mean, in fact, obviously at the time the costings were done in July, interest rates would have actually been lower, and therefore the business case would have stacked up even more at that point. The business cases, there was no effect. I accept there was no official document, but there were costings done between finance and the leisure services, which demonstrated that the business case stacked up, and that was what we've reflected in the July council report.
Can you move to the second?
Certainly,
now?
certainly. Yeah. Who decided to repurpose the levelling up match funding, and where is the clear audit trail of this? The council report of 14th July 2022 is all based on the successful levelling up fund bid. Nowhere in there does it say, if this bid fails, we will spend the 750,000 anyway. So I'm just wondering what the audit trail of Councillor Aaron could maybe let me know how we moved from where we were in full council. The levelling up bid failed, but you decided to do it anyway. That would be really helpful for my second question. Thank you.
Does anybody want to answer that?
Yeah, so as I explained in when I was just talking through the decision, the council decision effectively provided recognised the addition to the capital programme in terms of the spend, and the addition to the capital programme in terms of the supported borrowing to finance the area scheme. So whilst I appreciate it was connected with a levelling up bid, the 3G pitch and the supported borrowing was not contingent upon the success of the levelling up bid, because it didn't need the grant funding. The funding was identified because the supported borrowing was what was going to finance the 3G pitch, and the addition to the capital programme in July added in both the spend and the supported borrowing, and therefore it's sort of academic in a way, the levelling up bid, because we didn't need the grant funding for that element to continue because it was self-financing and had been approved. And the decision to put it into the capital programme with the supported borrowing gave the lawful authority to continue with that element of the scheme.
Thank you, man. I mean, I can't find anywhere in this document where it says that. This is July last year. Okay, question 3, please. How and by whom was it decided to then spend the 250,000 earmarked for replacing the athletics track on the 3G pitch? And I now gather that this 250k is still sitting in the budget somewhere. I'm really confused on that. Thank you.
Yeah, so effectively the pitch would have come in. Sorry, my apology, not the pitch. The athletics track, the 250,000 for the athletics track was already in the capital programme in 22-23, and would have been. I'd have to go back. Apologies, I haven't done that, but I would have to go back to find out when that came into the capital programme. But I'm assuming it came in, maybe even in 21, 22, or 22, 23 via the capital. The normal capital programme process. It was in the capital programme already in 22-23, and therefore was, as I say, usefully used as a match without actually needing additional funding to be identified. Because of the implementation of the pitch, the track hasn't yet continued, but that budget still remains in the capital programme.
So it's still there.
Still there, and obviously can potentially be reprioritised or maintained, whichever, following our review that's coming forward.
Fourth, why wasn't this massive spend? I mean, it's clearly equivalent to over 1% in council tax referred back to any other form of scrutiny or governance. Even small amounts come back for variation. And I think it was Councillor Louise that said at the previous FROSC, would we have approved this spend if it had come for us like that? I'm just asking, did these spends go to a capital programme board, informal cabinet, opportunities board, SLT, project board? I know you've got a dedicated project board for repair and maintenance and leisure. Did this pivot go to any of those? And why didn't it come, given the amount, why didn't it come back to full council? Thanks, Amanda.
As I say, once the amount was in the capital programme, that gave officers lawful authority to move forward with that scheme. We have many schemes within our capital programme that are over £500,000 in spend, and they don't all come back to committee on a regular basis unless there's reason for that. So it would have been contained overarchingly within the capital monitoring reports. I'm sure maybe Sarah can confirm, because I don't attend the leisure capital spend board personally, so I don't know for definite, but I'm assuming it would have been part of the discussions at that board. But effectively, because it was in the capital programme, it would have been being monitored in accordance with any other of the capital schemes within the capital programme. It wouldn't have needed or required special attention.
Thank you. And my final question is to you and to Councillor Charlie. Do you feel that all this met our financial standing orders? You're comfortable, both of you, that moving these monies around like this meets our financial standing orders? Thank you.
Councillor Charlie, lead it.
I take the opinion of our section 151 officers, and it's a yes in terms of what she's set out in front of you, Chair.
Yeah, as I say, on the 14th of July 2022, council unanimously approved for the addition to the capital programme, which included the areas 3G pitch to be supported or to be funded from supported borrowing that received full support, and that gave lawful authority for officers to continue with that scheme in good faith. As I say, I've also consulted separately with the monitoring officer to confirm whether he had a different opinion to me or not, and he also is of that view. I'm obviously not to speak for on his behalf. So yeah, I'm confident that we have complied with our contract. Sorry, our standing orders.
Thank you very much.
There we are.
That's be
Diolch
done.
yn fawr.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for those clarifications, Amanda. Diolch yn fawr. Next question, Councillor Tom Montgomery, please. Can you hear me online?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and thanks for letting me speak. Apologies, I've got to shoot off very shortly for another meeting. I just want to say that I share Cheryl's view on this. I'm really shocked that we can say that the vote that we took last year approved this spend. That report was not clear in saying that we were writing a blank check for park areas to be to get this 3G pitch, irrespective of how the levelling up grant came through or not. It was my understanding from reading that report that we were talking exclusively about the levelling up bid, and it's very different to see a 3G pitch installed as a part of a £20 million funding programme opposed to the pitch done by itself. But anyway, I'll leave that point there. I wanted to pick up on Cheryl's first point about the clearer financial image of how we get this pitch to stack up financially. So I've had a little bit of experience in 3G pitches with supporting Llandudno Football Club with getting their 3G pitch relayed. And I just had some questions based on that, because in the report, it says that the pitch could last 20 years, and then the finances talk about it lasting 15. In all of the contractors that the football club have spoke to about relaying its pitch, no one has ever said under any circumstances they would give a warranty of it lasting 15 years. The football club is now building its business case for the pitch to last 7 years, because that's how long our first pitch has lasted. So I just feel like we need some clarification on that, on where that time frame has come from, because like I said, Llandudno Football Club's lasted 7 years, and that was using it for an average of 5 hours a day. This report talks about it lasting 15 and using 10 hours a day. So I'm a bit perplexed by that, and I could really do with something in writing from the company that has installed the pitch to back up where 15 years has come from, because I'm staggered by that. I then wondered how we got to the £300,000 saving over the 15 years, assuming it lasts that 15-year time. Perhaps you can help me a bit more with the figures there, because part of your maintenance saving comes out roughly to, you're going to spend about 15k a year on maintenance. So for going back to the football club again, £5,000 of that goes straight away to the maintenance contractor that comes in and does the tests. You then have to do an hour of maintenance for every 10 hours you use the pitch. So you're doing an hour worth of staff time every single day, according to this report. It then doesn't appear that you factored in purchasing the equipment to do the maintenance. You then talk about the pitch being licensed by the FAW to a FIFA standard and the Welsh Rugby Union. I know that for the Football Association alone, getting that license is £2,500, and you need to do that every 3 years, and that's assuming you pass it with flying colours. I can't see that in there. And then also you don't, from what I can see, factor in one-off repairs. So again, going back to Llandudno Football Club, the nearest 3G pitch that I'm aware of that is used for similar levels for similar sports, they've spent about £40,000 over 7 years doing one-off repairs for the high usage areas. I don't see any of that in the financial analysis that you've given in this report, and that's what I think Cheryl was trying to touch on, that there's some real concerns that this isn't going to stack up. And you know, when it comes to relaying the pitch in 15 years, is there a budget for that? Because I think it's going to be around £200,000. So if you haven't budgeted for that, that 300 net saving has suddenly gone down to 100 without all of the other points I've just touched on. Sorry, I know there was a lot of figures thrown out there, but I'm just really concerned that without a proper financial analysis, this isn't actually going to stack up, and we're going to end up with a pitch that can't be used.
I'll ask the officers to come in to respond to the point you made. Thank you, Councillor.
Dwi'n mynd i ddod fewn I ddechrau, Dylan. Just want to, I disagree with the point Councillor Montgomery made about writing a blank cheque. There was a clear amount that we've asked for from the capital programme, so it wasn't a blank cheque. I don't agree with that at all. I agree, yes, we are going for FIFA standards, so we can have matches on there, including the rugby. And as you can see from the report, we are paying at the moment £61,000 a year to maintain the grass pitch. And going forward, it will be less expensive. Amanda, if I hand over to you to talk about the 300,000. Of course. Just to touch on the maintenance as well. So, the manufacturers have effectively confirmed that the pitch, obviously subject to how well you maintain it, the pitch could potentially last up to 20 years. Now, obviously, we don't believe would be a sensible time frame to go over. The reason 15 years has been gone for is that we're confident, and I say we, I talk on behalf of Mally Tidswell, the leisure manager, is confident that the pitch can be maintained effectively and to last a 15-year period. And the reason we're confident of that is because we are maintaining it in accordance with the manufacturer and consultants' advice about how to maintain it. We are well versed already in good practice on maintaining pitches, and in fact, we have a clear example of that already. The Barn 3G pitch is now 12 years old and is still in good working order, having been maintained regularly in accordance with standards, as is the other pitch at Areas. I think it is naive to say a pitch can only last as long as a warranty. We all have cars that have 3-year warranties on. I think you're still driving them beyond 3 years. The warranty is just a time frame that a manufacturer will continue to guarantee something. So we are responsible certainly for ensuring that we maintain effective maintenance to get that life. And clearly, Leisure are well practiced in it. As I say, they are clear about how to do it. They're doing it in accordance with standards, and they have experience and proof existing of being able to maintain pitches appropriately for a long period of time. I think perhaps it's not necessarily appropriate to compare it to a pitch at another club. The standard and quality of the pitches may well differ. Something that was installed a number of years ago isn't necessarily akin to something that's been installed today. It's we've gone for a pitch that is of elite sport quality, very high quality, and I would guess is not a like-for-like comparison with the pitch that the council is referring to. In terms of the business case, that's set out. The detail is set out in Appendix 2. Just bear with me while I ever so quickly open it up. But effectively, the maintenance costs that are being put forward here is reduced down from 60,000 to about £15,000 a year. The £15,000 a year that's been included is to incur £6,000 a year for decompacting, maintaining the fibres on the pitch. The test to ensure, the annual test to ensure that it still meets FIFA and WRU standards, and actually more importantly than meeting FIFA and WRU standards, maintain it effectively for safety. That's a test that makes sure that it's still, absolutely level, that it doesn't have any unforeseen dents or divots in it or whatever that are going to cause injury or whatever. That's a test that we will do annually and will cost £1,400 a year. The equipment you reference, we already have, and including a tractor which has been purchased as part of the implementation of the pitch as it is, and those costs effectively, or maintenance of that tractor, should I say, comes to £250, and so they come to £750.
there isn't actually a requirement for additional staff time because we already have the staff to do the drag brushing that is needed on a regular basis, and quite a bit of their time has been freed up by the fact, or will be freed up by the fact, that they're not going to have to be continually moving the posts between football posts and rugby posts between the pitches as they currently are now. They can leave them set up, but nonetheless, we have also included within the maintenance costs a provision of around £7,500 per year to fund additional overtime at recognising that there may be some pressurised peak points of busyness where we might have to get them to do additional work. So that's what makes up the maintenance budget that's foreseen in relation to the project. Therefore, we are saving about £45,000 a year in maintenance costs. The additional income that's been recognised in the business case, or in the analysis that's in Appendix 2, we already now this year have attracted that additional income. So that's a prudent estimate of the additional income that we believe the pitch can generate, and that is just purely reflecting the additional income that we have already secured from the WRU for the expansion in the use of the facility that they are doing in promoting and developing the women's game in North Wales. The actual income we are likely to get, we believe, will be significantly higher than £34,000 because we haven't yet taken account of all the additional community income that we'll get from clubs, sporting groups, other facilities, of both the other pitch plus the 3G pitch. Bear in mind, the 3G pitch isn't just there for the WRU. Certainly the WRU and the Crusaders will be using it a lot, but so will others, our schools, our community groups, etc. So there's plenty scope for more additional income. But even based on the additional income already secured of £34,000 a year, the reduced maintenance costs of £45,000 a year, that already covers the interest rate charges at the current interest rates now. So bear in mind, had a business case, or had you seen these detailed costings last July, then the figures would have actually been higher, because at that point interest was probably only at about 4 or 4.5%. So you know, already it's been, this business case, or sorry, this analysis, financial analysis, has been brought up to date to the current rate, and it's got at the moment an assumption of 6.5% in there, which is the 5. I think interest rates currently at 5.25. They're expected to go up to 5.5, and we generally have to pay about 1% above the base rate. So that's why 6.5% has been used in here. So as I say, you can see in the analysis that over the 15-year period, we will actually generate additionally, or net savings of 299,000. And actually, as I say, it will be more than that, because there will be a higher level of income than we've assumed in this analysis. I hope and I think that covers all of the points that you raised. Thank you.
I'm sure that's covered all your points there, has it, Tom? Yeah.
It has responded to them, yeah, Chair, but it was more the fact that I kind of expected at this level in this report we would be getting all of that detail, explaining and putting in writing that the contractor thinks that it can last that long. So if I could have that, Amanda, followed up in writing, that would be very useful. Thank you.
Okay, there we are. Thank you, John. Councillor Louise.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for letting me speak, because I also have to go soon. I think Amanda just nailed it really when she said, had we seen the costings last July? That's why we're here today. And the only reason that we've got this on the agenda today is because the Conservative Group's notice of motion. Had we seen all the costings in a proper spend to save business case last July, maybe attached to the 14th of July, which said, if we don't get the bid, we're going to do this, then I think we wouldn't be here today. We would have had that debate as part of that levelling up bid thing. So there's the crux of the problem. You're never going to convince me that you had lawful authority from last July, which is why I think it's important that somebody else decides with the word audit in the title, whether you did have lawful authority to do what you've done. based on that 14th of July report last year. But I just want to stick up for the athletics community, because in all of this, basically what's happened is you've taken the 250,000 and you've used it on the rugby pitch. And in Aaron's opening speech, there was not even an apology to the athletics community. That's what's happened. So it was myself that agreed to that spend, and it was 21-22 as part of the overall repair and maintenance. And of course, the athletics community and everybody that uses the track were delighted, got delayed because of the pandemic. No one in the council, officer or political leader, has had the guts and the decency to pick up the phone or send an email to the athletics community to tell them they've taken their 250 and they're putting it into the pitch. No one. That's not how we treat our community groups. No one has involved them in that decision to let them know, you're not getting your track again. Sorry, guys, we're going to do a rugby pitch instead. And I find that pretty disgraceful. So I want to ask why that hasn't happened. And I want to stick up for the athletics community. You say a minute ago, you've given the 250 and now you're saying the 250 is still in the capital programme. So I'm really confused about that. I'm sure you can say to me now you're going to apply for more funding, but you know, that's a real disgrace. Can I have a question as to why the athletics community haven't been contacted?
I know the leader wants to go in, and I know Amanda, it's up to you.
Can I respond? Can I respond, please, Chair? Yes, that is not correct at all, Councillor Louise. The athletic track is still in the capital programme. It's been delayed because we were doing work on the pitch, but the work on the track will continue.
But I thought that's where we've got the 250 for the 720 for the rugby pitch.
What members agreed last year was an addition to the capital programme.
There we are. So I think that's been clarified. Diolch yn fawr. Councillor Nigel.
Thank you, Dilwyn. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, what can I say about the opposition? I'm just really disappointed. We've already heard from the Strategic Director and Section 151 officer that happy that all due processes have been carried out. We've heard that there's a £110,000 grant has been received from the WRU, the largest grant possibly in Wales that's ever been given. That shows their confidence in what we are doing in Conway. And I think, you know, for an asset that will be used by elite sport, our wider public, and even our school children, we should be very, very proud. I think we were blessed in my early days on the council to have John Hardy, who had a vision to equal out elite sport in Conway or in North Wales to that in South Wales. And that mantle has been carried on by Mally Tidswell, and very well done indeed. I fully support Mally in this. I think he's doing a great job, him and his team, finding this funding from within their budget, which basically, you know, is going to bring £915,000 saving over the 15 years. You know, even compared with the maintenance costs that Councillor Montague has mentioned, £2,000 a year, you know, there's a substantial saving here over the 15 years. And I can't see it as anything but a spend to save. And I think our asset is in the right hands. It's being managed very, very well. And we've got something here that we'll be able to use long into the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Nigel. Diolch yn fawr. Leader.
Diolch, Gareth. I entirely agree with Nigel. We bandy this word transformation around a lot. But this is a really good example of how we can transform our services. We're providing better facilities. We're cutting our costs. We're increasing the health and well-being of members of our communities. It's absolutely what we should be doing. What I find very surprising is the Conservative members here, if it was paid for by Shared Prosperity Fund, they're quite happy with that. That's fine. There was no questions asked then about the probity of what is taxpayers' money. So I do not understand where you're coming from. If the UK government was paid for it, it's all fine. If we're using money, which is Conway residents' taxpayers' money, it's not fine. Now, that makes no sense. Taxpayers' money is taxpayers' money, and it should be spent properly. and with probity. And I absolutely feel that this has demonstrated that we do that. But we need to move forward. We just can't sit still. What's very true, you know, to ask for a report to come to scrutiny, fair enough. To call a special council meeting when you already knew a report was coming to scrutiny, when you already knew the audit office had been notified, there was absolutely no point in that meeting. And that's what wastes taxpayers' money. We had senior officers here. We had to cancel the climate challenge board, 16 senior officers, 6 councillors. That hasn't been able to be rearranged until the end of this month. So there are consequences for that. But yeah, your disregard for shared prosperity taxpayers funds compared to what you're saying now seems very, very strange. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Harry, and I'm sure that questions have already been answered will be re-asked now for us to go forward with where we are. So thank you, Harry. And I wasn't getting at you there.
No, not at all. But if it helps, Chair, so there were 3 questions I wanted to ask.
Great.
The first one, there have already been some similar questions asked, but the specific bit of detail I would like has been provided. So I'll crack on with that, and then the other 2 haven't been touched. But I'll put the question to the leader, particularly in light of the comments he's just made. Looking back at the report from the 14th of July, where specifically does it say that there is approval for this pitch to take place separate from the Levelling Up Fund project? The leader's been very clear about financial probity, so perhaps he can direct me to the specific paragraph.
I can't give you that detail at the moment, Harry. I mean, where is the principle here? Is the principle of us bringing forward schemes that save our residents money and improves their facilities, or is the principle about arguing over what paragraph on the 14th of July there is there? I mean, it's crazy. If these schemes were always going to go ahead, they were put to one side as match funding for a bigger prize. But the actual principle and the value of them and the fact that we should be doing them remains the same. So I don't really get your point.
Well, the point I was getting at, and I think the leader's just made comments about financial probity. I've asked him, where was this agreed? And he's just said he can't answer the question. That frankly is not good enough for the leader of the principal.
Sorry, I think our section 1.5 officers covered this at length.
Okay.
So I would refer to the section 1.5 officers report.
There we are. Did you have one other point you wanted to?
There were 2 more, but I still want to. Okay, fine. Happy for section 151 officer to answer that first question. But which part of that original report includes that detail? Which part? I mean, a paragraph number would be helpful. I'm not expecting, repetition of prose, but if you can just give me the paragraph number.
Okay, well, just in that context, the recommendation on the 14th of July report was that the council approves the variation to the capital programme 22-23 and the proposed funding source. That was the recommendation in 2.1, and in table 3.6, it expressly shows that the funding source of the additional £1 million is 650,000 unsupported borrowing to be funded over 15 years from increased income from pitch rentals and maintenance budgets, and an external contribution of 100, which in fact has turned out to be 110, and capital funding already approved in the 2021-22 capital programme to develop the track at Pericarius of 250. So that was effectively the explicit demonstration of the addition of the £1 million and the funding of the £1 million, and it was approved under the recommendation.
Are you satisfied with that answer, Harry?
Well, not really, because that makes it clear it's part of one project, not another. But look, I suppose I accept I'm not going to be satisfied. However, you'll be happy to hear that I think Amanda's probably just answered my second question. Right. So we'll leave that. I'll move on to the third one. A few years ago, Audit Wales published a report, didn't they, improving project management for Conway County Borough Council, and this reflected on the experience we'd had with Mocktra, didn't it? And it specifically said that Conway had taken steps that I'll read it now, that it believes will prevent a repeat of the issues it faced with the property lease at Mocktra Commerce Park. Now, I appreciate that with Eris, we weren't leasing a property, but this was a significant property-related transactional bit of expenditure. You cannot claim that picking up a grass pitch and replacing it for 3G pitch is repair and maintenance. It is clearly a replacement with one item or replacing one item with something that isn't identical. So the bit I'd like to query is specifically one of the things this council said it would do was that the council's senior leadership team would collectively review, scrutinise and sign off any project. We've got a number of members of the senior leadership team here today in this chamber who haven't commented on this so far today. So I'd like to know what input they had personally into this and scrutinising it as a project.
I will ask the Chief Executive if he wants to respond to that.
Yeah, I will respond, Chair. Clearly, in terms of the process of approving the funding, that's been covered today. That project then proceeded in accordance with your usual capital investment in this type of facility by procuring the right developers and by instigating that project. Not every single project that we undertake here has to have a project board, right? If we did that, we wouldn't move things forward at all. So in terms of the investment that's been done there, we've had several reports that have come through explaining the capital programme since that time. So it's been on the capital programme since that time. So we also, as already been mentioned, the service itself is able to control its own project by the project, which is the capital in the economy and culture service. So they monitor that program as well. So in like that, I personally consider that we allow our officers to undertake these roles by giving them the authority within that capital program to undertake that. If we didn't, we wouldn't move anything on. And that's what's happened here. Now, this pitch has been installed, it's been approved, it's been licensed, it's gone through all the hoops. So I'm not really sure what more we could have done to ensure that this pitch was laid to the appropriate standard. So from an officer's point of view, I am satisfied that we've undertaken the work to a standard which has now complied with the requirements of all the licensing authorities, be that FIFA, WIU, but also has been approved and it is now under warranty. So in that respect, I'm satisfied that this work has been done to that standard because they have passed that test.
Could I come back very
please.
quickly? I take the chief executive's point he's tried to make that officers need to be left to get on with delivering projects. I also take on board that you wouldn't necessarily have a project board for every single project. I'm looking and I've got printed out in front of me what this council supposedly told Audit Wales, which was that any project of more than £250,000 that related to property would be managed in this way. So you're saying that we wouldn't do that. Why do the Wales Audit Office seem to think different?
For clarity, that reflects the leasing or purchasing of individual properties. That's what we do. They come to SLT. If we are purchasing a property at the value of more than 250,000 or leasing at about 250,000, it needs SLT approval. This is a project which is different. This is a replacement of a pitch. It's not purchasing, it's not selling, it's not leasing. It is the purchasing and the laying of the pitch, which would come under its own project. So that's the mechanism that SLT has undertaken, and those relate to purchases and leasing of property. That's what the standard we've considered done.
I don't know what has not been clarified.
One very final point, and it was just to pick up what the chief executive said about this is replacing the pitch. Well, no, it isn't. The pitch that was there before was grass. This is 3G. You're basically saying we've replaced an apple with a pear. It's not a replacement.
It's still a pitch.
Chair, I'd just like that I don't agree with that observation. So I just make that clear.
Here we are. From the line one, Canary Paris.
I'm going to go on now to Councillor Garrett, please.
If you just bear with me as I try and flick through my notes and not ask questions that have already been covered when it comes down to it. But, you know, I think there are two issues here. There is the governance issue and the line of how the decision was made. And that then is reflected in the lack of scrutiny and the confusion around the whole thing. Because when I was looking at it, I was convinced that the 3G pitch was part of the bid. The table 2 clearly links the pitch to the bid, and it's also stated in option 4.1 that it's part of the bid. And there was no option for a standalone 3G pitch in that original report. And I think it sums it up in today's report in 3.8, which says that the council did not specifically state that the 3G pitch would progress regardless of the success of the Levelling Up Fund. And I think it's a shame that this has all muddied the waters, because I think from what Councillor Aaron was saying, this has got potentially to be a really, really good scheme. But it's actually been muddied and soured by the fact that we don't feel that the decision was clear and that there was the opportunity for proper scrutiny.
Can I ask Aaron or the officers to respond to that point? Because I think it has been, and I'll bring you back in, Gareth. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Nanny?
Yes, well, it was a part of the match funding for the Levelling Up Fund, wasn't it? But as is mentioned in today's report, it wasn't contingent on the fact that we were successful with that bid, but it was our allocated funding for the match funding for the Levelling Up Fund. So that's why they were connected, but they weren't mutually inclusive if we were successful with one.
Okay, so.
Yeah, okay, but I'm just saying that that's where, if you like, the confusion, I think, has come from, and the misunderstandings have actually come from, for what potentially could be a really, really good scheme. Because as Councillor Aaron pointed out, or Amanda pointed out, it looks as if the funding, the extra income has already been achieved, which is really, really good news. And so I just ask how long that agreement is with the WRU for that extra funding, so that we can have some sort of idea as to how long it's going to last for. Are we going to be getting extra funding from area school? Are we looking for the athletics to produce extra funding, just to spread the risk rather than having all our eggs in one basket? And, because there is a little bit of, whenever you go in for these extra income, you mentioned the Crusaders Rugby Club. I presume that we've done proper due diligence on the company and that we're comfortable with their funding streams and that the stability of that company. And, just the fact that the promotions company has now gone into liquidation, it shows how difficult it is to rely on these extra income from events and other organisations and things like that. But I congratulate Leisure on this initial agreement with the WRU to actually cover that extra funding, and that's really, really good news. On the life of the pitch, then generally speaking, in accountancy terms, a 3G pitch is not regarded as a long-term asset. So again, it's great to hear that we've got confirmation in writing from the manufacturers that it's expected to last 15 years. And I just presume that we've had words with our auditors that they're comfortable that we can depreciate it over a 15-year period. On the tendering for the whole thing, we'd had a report from April 22 saying that there were weaknesses in our tendering process. So I was just wondering, when the bid was opened, why there were no cabinet members present, which is, as I understand it, the norm when bids are opened, and why the perceived amount for the contract was actually, the lowest bid was 340% less than the amount quoted on the document as the expected amount for the contract.
Quite a few points, valid points now. Can I ask for answers to these points up on? I'll bring you back in, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Amanda to.
The WRV will
Yes.
the depreciation and the tendering system.
Yeah, diolch Dylan. I'll ask Amanda to respond to the budgetary points. But just on the point, Councillor Gareth, you made about confusion, when the pitch was being, the work was going ahead, I did have several emails from local members, and I did make effort at that time to respond to those questions. And I've not had any new questions today. So I'm not sure what you're confused about really, because I've answered these questions in writing and I've answered them here today. But on the budgetary questions, I'll ask Amanda to respond.
Thank you very much. In terms of the income, yeah, I think I totally understand what you're saying about not being dependent on a single source, and certainly that isn't the intention. The reference I've made to the WRU additional income is really, I was just demonstrating that we've already generated that income, and therefore I was just being prudent in that financial analysis. Obviously, the intention is to and the anticipation is that we'll have other income as well from, as you say, sports groups, community groups, schools, etc. And therefore there'll be a range of income streams. I must confess, in terms of the length of time that we've got an agreement with WRU, I'm not cited on that. I don't know whether, unfortunately, Mali is unwell today, so I know he's not able to join us. But it's been predominantly predicated this year in terms of the growth and expansion in the women's game, and certainly I don't believe that's a one-off intention. You know, I see that as being something that will be continuing over time, because that was one of obviously the big motivations behind the WRU's contribution to us, to obviously be able for the facility to be much more available for them to expand both the men's game, the women's game, and youth workshop camps as well. So you know, fairly hopeful about that. But you know, as you mentioned earlier about the promoter, you know, we, you know, obviously these things happen and we can't foresee the future with absolute certainty. But what I absolutely know is that Mali is working very actively out in the community to generate income, and for instance, in relation to concerts, you know, the contract with that provider had come to an end this last year, and I know we've already there's already a number of other companies that have approached us with interest in holding those kind of other events at the facility. So in that context, you know, hopefully there will always be a range of income sources available to us, and certainly sufficient in the context of meeting that business case, which was just £34,000 of additional income. In terms of the depreciation, obviously I haven't explicitly discussed with the auditors whether they feel a useful life of 15 years on a specific asset which wouldn't be material to the accounts, whether they're happy with that. But you know, we obviously in looking at our financial statements, the auditors will consider our accounting policies, which includes our policies around depreciation, and comment if they feel we're not applying appropriate policies. But as I say, I think at the end of the day, you know, the concept, as I appreciate you're fully aware, the concept of depreciation is it's a measure of the consumption of the asset over its life, and as I explained earlier, leisure services are absolutely confident that the life of the assets can be will be 15 years, and as I say, that's predicated on their the fact the Barnes 3G pitch is already 12 years old and going great guns, plus you know, the maintenance scheduling and routine that they have put in place for the new pitch. In terms of the tendering process, perhaps if I could not touch on that just for the moment, because only in the context of I'm just a little bit concerned we're airing into discussions about the exempt items. So perhaps we can come back to that when we get to that, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gareth.
You know, I'd just like to finish up by saying, look, there's some really, really positive and good work on here. There's some really, really good news. But as I said at the beginning, it's just to say it's shame it's been tarnished by the fact that there's a lot of confusion and lack of clarity and lack of certainty that we have actually followed the correct process. And it's all about the governance and the process. And, you know, at the time I pulled my hand up, maybe I'm a bit slow on these things, but I didn't realize that this was going to go ahead anyway. And I'm wondering how, you know, there was a lack of, you know, not a huge amount of scrutiny. There's been a lot more questions and scrutiny asked today about the ins and outs of income and life of the pitch and all the other bits and pieces there. I think I asked one question on the life of the pitch, which Mike kindly came back to us and explained what his view was or what the perceived view then, but there was no opportunities. And I'm just thinking, you know, did it not occur to anybody that the lack of questions on this potentially controversial and challenging project, that nobody was asking any questions on it, that, you know, did it not occur to anybody that a lot of councillors did not realise that it was a standalone project and did not depend on the bid? Thank you.
I don't know if you want to come in, but I think that point has been clarified, hasn't it? More than once already today, you know, that there has been, it's possibly just a difference of opinion. So
I can't hear what Councillor Dillwyn's saying.
can you hear me now?
I can, Dillwyn, thanks very much. You just keep the microphone just under your chin, that would be great.
There we are. I'll try. I'll try my
Thanks
best.
very
then.
much.
Yeah, well, no, I think the points that Gareth, and Gareth agrees with me, the points that he brought up now, they have been clarified, and we'll move on to the next question now. Cynghorydd Nia, ga I ddod â chdi fewn ŵan? Diolch yn fawr.
Councillor Nia, can I bring you in, please? Thank you. Thank you to the chair. And thank you, Aaron and Amanda, for your contributions this afternoon. Is it okay if I make a proposal? We are not accepting proposal at the moment, but when it is time, I'll let you know. Thank you.
O, na chdi, iawn, diolch fawr ti.
Thank you very much, Nia.
Councillor Paul?
Chairman, as a new councillor, when this came before us in the summer, I saw no reason to scrutinise it more thoroughly than I scrutinised it and voted for it, because at the time it seemed what was in that report didn't put any red flags up for me. So it happened on my watch, and I take full responsibility for that decision last summer. What has frustrated me, and I'm absolutely happy to support the most rigorous scrutiny of anything, but what has frustrated me over the period since the many questions were then subsequently asked, which has culminated today, which again I'm happy with, is I just don't understand why our senior officers who said today everything was done in compliance with governance, in compliance with the law, and in a sense there's nothing to see here because we are giving you our professional opinion. This whole matter was done correctly. I mean, Councillor Louise has uncomfortably challenged the senior officers to say nothing you say is going to make me believe it was legal, which is, without having a legal opinion, I feel very uncomfortable with that challenge, because in a sense, we've got to value our professional officers' legal opinions, because we're not lawyers, we're not financiers, and we have to accept them. So it would be really helpful to me if the chief exec could say, why couldn't this matter? I mean, I found the special council meeting deeply uncomfortable. Why under our scrutiny procedures, the definitive statement could not be made much earlier, and then we wouldn't have had all this deep discomfort that we've had?
I have asked Matt and the chief executive. It's up to you which one of you wants to come in first, but I think some of the points that you raised there have already been clarified, Councillor Paul, but I'll ask the chief executive.
I'll come in on Councillor Paul's final point. I'm not sure if Matt wants to come in on the general legal point, but yeah, I completely understand the question. The only thing I would say is I think it was raised at the July Frost meeting, and what we want to make sure when we bring a document before scrutiny is it has all the information that you need. So what we don't want is to just put a statement out there without the information to back that up. So yeah, it is frustrating. It's frustrating for all of us the time that sometimes things come through, but I can assure you that a lot of work went into it to make the report as clear as it possibly could be today, to alleviate, hopefully, some of the concerns that were raised. And to be fair, I think we've had a good discussion here today, where you've been able to hear the professional advice that's been provided by the Section 151 officer, who has been in discussion with the monitoring officer around the different elements here. So hopefully that gives comfort to the scrutiny committee today about the processes that were taken. I accept not everybody will be happy or have the same view, but that is the professional view that's been provided. So I hope that gives you some comfort, Paul.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Just bring Matt in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just conscious that I know that Amanda's covered this already, but Councillor Paul's asked the question again in terms of the lawfulness of the decision. So the simple answer is yes, it was lawfully approved. Specifically, and this has been touched upon, any increase in capital expenditure above £500,000 has to be approved by the council. The report was submitted to the council requesting that approval was made for that increase and explaining the business case behind that increase, and that's what was approved, and that was approved unequivocally. The approval, the resolution of the council was that the variation to the capital programme 22-23 and the proposed funding source be approved. That was the council's decision. So to keep it simple, that's why the expenditure was lawful, because then under the FPRs of the council that are also within the constitution, such approval in terms of the capital programme approves the expenditure that follows from it. So that's my clarity.
Nigel, is that a new hand or an old hand?
It's a new hand, Chair.
It's a new hand. Is it something that you have in addition to what you've said previously?
Yes, it is.
And then Councillor David, I'll ask you to come in afterwards.
Thank you. Chair, I'm just really surprised. Some of the comments today, Councillor Gareth, there's been so many questions. There's been so many questions by his colleagues, and the answers are falling on deaf ears. I'm just really surprised with Councillor Gareth and his colleagues. They just don't listen. And what I want to do is I want to draw this political media circus to a close. If I can, I'd like to move the recommendation.
I've got another speaker, Nigel, before we come to a close. Before we come
well,
to
I do have a question, and that's on the recommendation 2.2 is that the leader requests Audit Wales Office to review the decision making. Well, they're already aware of it. So my question is to Matt, is does 2.2 have to include that? Because I just think it's another waste of time.
Can I ask you to come in, Matt?
Yeah, Chair, I think that's a matter for any proposer and seconder within the committee rather than for me. The committee have been advised that it's already been referred.
There we are. There we are. Councillor David.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, having looked at all the papers, I think my opinion is it was very dubious legal decision. I mean, that's what the officers are saying, that everything was done legally and properly. I think many of us think maybe not on that, but I think we need to look forward to the future, how we don't get into this situation again. I think too many decisions are taken by too few people in this council. I mean, there were many members that weren't even aware that the 3G pitch was going ahead once the levelling up bill had failed, and that's not acceptable. We need to talk more. And Nigel was saying about listen more. Yeah, and I think perhaps the cabinet should listen more, really, because it's not. It is a bad taste in people's mouths. I think really that this has all gone ahead when people were not fully aware of all the implications of it, or the amount of money being spent. So that's my point, really, Chair. That really we need to look forward to the future, that we don't get into this situation again. And I welcome the fact that it's been referred to Audit Wales. Thank you.
Thank you for that, David. Well, I've got no other speakers, so I will now come to Nia, who wants to make a proposal.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose that we note and accept the explanation of the process of making decisions and the business case with regards to the 3G pitch in Stadium CSM in Aders Park, which will secure the future of the stadium for the people of Conwy. And this might be too late, but I'd like to propose that we don't make an application to the office for the works behind the 3G pitch. And now hopefully we will be able to stop wasting everyone's time, especially officers' time who obviously have enough work on their plate at the moment. Thank you, Nia. I'm going to accept.
Proposals there. Can I have a seconder for Nia's
Can I second that, Chair?
original proposal? And thank you, Nigel. And for 2.2, which Nia has also proposed, can we have that proposal again, Nia, for the 2.2?
Bod dim angen
Yeah.
I gyfeirio y mater ar swyddfa.
You don't need to refer to the office.
Happy to second that proposal, Chair.
So, do I need guidance from you here now, Matt?
Well, Chair, we've got a proposal and a seconder. Perhaps we can take a vote on that proposition.
On the first.
Unless there is an amendment, Chair, of course.
Yeah, is there an amendment?
I would like to make another recommendation.
Councillor Chair, can you just make sure you're next to your microphone again, please?
Yes, sure. I'd like to make an alternative recommendation.
Well, Matt, the way you read the Constitution, can you guide me now on how to share this?
It depends. I think we need to hear what that is, because it may be that constitutes an amendment, or it may be that it's a separate proposal, and we do need to dispose with this proposal prior to considering and voting on any further proposals. So perhaps we could hear that, Chair,
and then decide.
And then decide is it essentially a council proposal, or could it constitute an amendment?
I'm happy to hear it, and I'll ask for your advice afterwards. So, Cheryl.
Okay, thank you. 2.1. That we can't note we can note this report, but that the decision making process still wasn't clear. That's 2.1.
That will be, if I'm clear here, if I can come in, that will be a for or against, is it?
Well, yeah, it's essentially a counter proposal. So
Yeah, okay.
it's not an amendment, it's a counter proposal. No, so I think in terms of one, I think we can take the vote on what's
the vote on either for or against.
And if that's the same case with the other matter, Chair, I think that the same would apply.
It's the same with 2.2, Matt. And my recommendation would be we refer this matter to Audit and Governance Committee for a more evidence-based report with full disclosure. That's my proposal. And I will get a seconder. Thank you.
We've had two proposals now. Do I ask for a seconder? Yeah, do we just go to the vote on both of them?
No, Chair, I think we dispose of the proposition. If that's lost, then clearly we've had notice of a different proposal that we can then consider and vote upon.
Yeah. So I'm correct now in asking you to show on the recommendation 2.1 whether if we're in favour of the recommendation to note clarification on the decision-making process and business case relating to the installation of the new 3G pitch at Stadium CSM Park areas. Can you show if you agree with that recommendation, please?
Chair, can I just ask a question of clarification?
Yes,
I think Councillor Nia wanted us to note and accept, not just purely to note. So I just like a bit of clarification before we go to the vote.
Nia, ga i ofyn ti eglurhad am hynna?
Nia, can I ask for clarification, please? Yes, that we accept.
The explanation of the processes.
It's clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, thanks, Chair. That's good to understand that.
Okay, yeah. There we are. So can I ask you to show if you're in favour of 2.1 as it is now? And can you all raise your hands if Who hasn't put their hands there?
Chair, could I come in on a point of order?
Yeah.
For Matt, what I've heard there from there is to note and accept, but the chair said put it up that it's as per 2.1, which I don't think it is as per 2.1.
No, I think it was clarified, Chair, that was to note and accept. It was clarified by the proposer and accepted. There was no indication
okay.
otherwise in the report.
Yeah. Sorry.
Chair, if we could just,
Oh, yeah.
if we can just, we've taken for, could we just take any votes against again?
We're taking the vote against 2.1 at the moment. Can everybody show if you're against?
3. You got 4 online.
1. Is it
Altogether,
1
that's what I
online?
thought, yeah. Yeah. So that's been carried, Chair.
2.1's been carried.
2.1 with the addition of the word accept has been carried.
Yeah, there we are. Diolch. 2.2.
Yeah, it was to Chair that was to not make a referral to the Welsh Audit Office.
To not make a referral to the office, which has been proposed and seconded, hasn't it? So can we show if we're in favour of not referring it, the motion to the auditor? If all hands are down now, we finished with the in favour. Can you show if you're against 2.2? Or if you're in favour of 2.2, isn't it? Of referring the more. Yeah. So, Matt?
That's been carried, Chair.
There we are. It's been carried. Diolch yn fawr. So, before we leave, I want to say on a personal note, who was involved all the time with
Chair, I think there is still an outstanding matter that Councillor Cheryl had put forward, which was to refer the matter to the audit committee. So yeah, so I think we do need to deal with that because that's a separate issue. Do we have a second to that proposition to refer to the council's audit committee?
Is there a seconder?
We have a seconder.
So can I ask?
Yes, Sir Chair, I'll second that.
It's been seconded, yeah.
Yeah.
Harry
okay.
seconded it, yeah. Fine. So can I ask now for you to show if you're in favour of referring this to the audit committee? Can you please show if you're in favour? So we've got 1, 2, 3 online. 3 online, is it? 6. Those against?
That's been lost, Chair.
There we are. Down. So can I thank you all for your patience and for your time? We've had a good discussion. Can I thank Aaron and the officers as well for explaining all the situations clearly. And can I say on a personal note as well, I'm very glad that we've got to where we are now, and I congratulate the officers on the improvements that's been done, and the cabinet and everybody who's been involved on the improvements that have been done. And I just like to remind everybody of something I said probably when it was being started in areas, is the explanation of the word areas and the translation to it. It's an old Welsh name, and it used to refer to when we had torches with a flame on them. That used to be areas. But more recently, it's referred to as a bright light. And the point I made then is still the point I make today, that areas is a bright light. But not only that, it's the leading light in North Wales for events. And I congratulate you on the way that you're keeping it going. May I also remind everybody as well of how hard we had to work then in discussions as well of getting the WRU and others to support areas being developed then. There was a very strong bid from Wrexham, and I think we need to bear that in mind today, as we know how much money has been ploughed into Wrexham by other people, by people from the outside as well, and they definitely haven't disappeared. And I'm so glad that Areas is now developing to a situation where we can still be the leading light in North Wales. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you, Chair. Over to you.
Thank you very much to my very able Vice Chair. There's been requests for a quick comfort break, so I suggest a 5-minute break now before we move on to the last report. Thank you very much. Okay, if we could restart, please. Okay, are we thumbs up to go? Okay, thank you for that, members. Right, we'll move on to item 9A, establishment of head of strategic housing and subsequent realignment of heads of service responsibilities, pages 56 to 75. Councillor Charlie's going to introduce it and Tracy Pardo is going to present the report. Thanks very much. Oh, and you as well. Okay.
Thank you. I think we'll go straight over to the Chief Executive because it's a very fine report, but something that I'm very, very supportive of. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent. Economic with time there, Councillor Charlie. Okay, Chief Exec, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chair, for allowing us to put this on the agenda late on. You know, we have full agendas, so I really appreciate that we're able to discuss this morning or this afternoon, as it turns out now. So just in terms of background, I think you'll all be aware that since my appointment, I've been considering our structures and what we need to deliver the council's priorities. And following the departure of our strategic director in January, I did feel that we needed some time to consider what actually we needed. It's quite easy, isn't it, to just jump to it and make some changes at that time and not think it through. I did put some temporary changes in terms of line management in January, and I'm proposing as part of this report that the arrangements are made permanent. I'd like to thank the officers who have taken more responsibility during that time. It's not easy, is it? You know, we're all busy, so having more responsibility brings with it more work. So I'm really grateful for that, and also the support of my SLT colleagues and SMT as well. As we all are aware, for the past 2 years, housing has become a crisis across the country. We have levels of homelessness that we've never seen before. And during my consideration of what I wanted to do, clearly our priorities in terms of housing have to be addressed. And we've seen also with the advent of the housing programme and the board, how much work is involved in delivering change. And I think that was really, having discussed with colleagues and thought it through, was something that we need to address. The size of our regulatory services is massive, and it's unfair on that service that we expect them to be dealing with a service that's exploded over the past few years without the need for more resource going in there at the strategic level. So really, good progress has been made over the past, certainly over the past 6 months, I think, in terms of starting to get that tanker to turn in terms of making a difference. But I do think that we do need to be able to push forward at pace to try and deliver both our own priorities, but also in partnerships with our RSL colleagues. And I strongly believe that the structure as proposed will enable us to move that agenda forward. There's clear synergy between our housing service and our property and estate service, and they've been working very closely, but clearly that work will need to continue, but with even greater working together under the same service will enable that change to happen quicker, in my mind. So in terms of the detail of the report, you'll see from 3.7 the changes that we're considering. Now, although it's setting up a new service that's part of this change, there are the consequential changes that I think that we need to make us more efficient in the way that we work, and that the things are placed in the right places to make a difference. So I'll go through them very quickly. So in terms of head of economy and culture, the county valuation estates to move to the head of strategic housing, and then communication and marketing to move to head of people and performance. That is, and none of these changes are any criticism of where they've been sitting. I'd like to make that point because a lot of fantastic work has been going on. But I would like to make the point that in terms of that communication and marketing, I think having it in a corporate function would help us in terms of the wider communications and marketing that we require as an authority. And then as part of that change, health and safety then moves from people and performance to the head of regulatory service. And of course, from regulatory goes housing. And also we have been looking at resilience and capacity in terms of our complaints and information service. It's a very small team, and there have been a lot of discussions over the past year, actually, even before I considered this, about moving it over to our audit procurement team to give it that more resilience, which I think that would do, and also keep the independence of audit because of its technical legislative nature. I don't think it compromises our audit function at all. So I think that's fine. So in a nutshell, that's the changes. Now we've undertaken an assessment in terms of the affected roles through Corn Ferry under the Hay scheme, and that's included in the exempt pack. So if there's any specific discussion on that, clearly we'd need to go into closed session to discuss the specifics there. But you'll see from 3.8 there is no impact on grades. And I'd also like to say that we conducted a very inclusive consultation process. So I've had individual meetings with the affected heads of service, but also with an open invitation to anybody else within the services that are affected. And I've had a lot of really, really good, positive engagement with staff around it. Very challenging questions, which you would expect. It's a change, isn't it? So you'd expect challenge. And some of those challenges we've taken on board in the proposal before you. And also I've liaised with my SMT team, and to be fair, a lot of very good comments made around the changes and maybe thinking about something different or alternatives, which I have taken on board and thought through. I do think it's quite easy, isn't it? You can make a raft of different changes and go further and further and further, but actually in terms of what we need and to achieve what we need, I think this is the right balance for me. But also by doing this, we also have a financial saving, which I think is also in these times, it's having that balance, isn't it? From having a team in place that can deliver for you, for your priorities, but also finding some savings. What we have found since losing the strategic director is that we are, we have felt the difference. We have felt the pressure that's been on different individuals at that top table has been significant. So we need to make sure that works for us as well. And I think this will give that balance. It will mean me having more direct reports, which I accept, and I'm more than happy to do. As I explained to you on numerous occasions, I have a real interest in housing in any event, and I have a real interest in delivering for the people of Conwy by driving that. So by having that individual there to drive that service forward, I hope that we'll be able to make the changes that we need, both in terms of homelessness, affordable housing generally across the county, be that on the coastal strip, but also in our rural communities. I think having that individual there who can link in with our partners would be excellent. So I don't want to take more of your time, but I would like to thank Tracy, who's sitting here, who's worked tirelessly over the summer months, and I'm sorry for putting you under that pressure, Tracy. But we really wanted to make this meeting and the next cabinet meeting to try and gauge your views first of all, but also to move things forward if we can. And yeah, so thank you, Tracy. And you'll note from the recommendations in part 2, and I'd certainly welcome your comments and scrutiny on those proposed changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, please, members. You all exhausted? Councillor Gareth. Thank you.
Not really a question, it's much of a comment. I think basically Preen has set out how he wants to set his team and structure. it's how he wants to take it forward, and if that's what he wants within reason, we should support it. Thank you.
Councillor Dilwyn.
Yeah, we and Weldon Hospital.
I also agree. I completely agree with what Gareth has said. We should support the idea. I think it's a really good one. The only question I have is, I don't know who will make the decision with regards to, will it come to the senior employment team, or is it internal? Because in the person specification, I have a question there. Oh, I'm sorry, Cheryl. I have a question there with regards to where it says here.
Communicate in Welsh to level at Diamond ar XXX.
And it's only on XXX and XXX. And I'd just like to make my mark there for this job role to be a Welsh essential role due to the communities this role will serve. And I think it's important that they are able to speak both languages due to the fact that they will be dealing with communities. And also, I think it's important to have a complete understanding of these communities and what housing means to the culture and language, and how not having this understanding could have an effect on our rural communities. As we have seen reduction in the past few years by not having the housing that we need for our Welsh communities. And I think there's an opportunity here to ensure that it is fair for everyone in the county. Thank you.
Diolch, Councillor Dilwyn. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Cynghorydd Dilwyn.
Thank you, Councillor Dilwyn. I really appreciate your comments there. It is a matter for the Employment Committee, and I'm sure we will have a discussion with regards to this, and we will present the full information to that committee with regards to the issues you've raised. And we also need to consider what we have. We have amazing officers who do speak Welsh, and I can also speak Welsh, which helps. But I think it's definitely a discussion that we need to have. And moving forwards, it's a very healthy thing to have this discussion. And I do appreciate, as I said in my presentation, that housing needs in our communities, whether they are in our towns or in the rural communities, you know, it's very important, and it's something that we will have to deal with as we move forwards. And if these issues are going to go through democracy, hopefully we will have dates for the committees by the end of the month. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reen. Next speaker, Councillor Chris online.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Gareth's right, where when the Chief Executive comes to us and says this is the structure he wants, then we should be supporting that. But I do have to express a little bit of concern, particularly in terms of the role of the executives. You know, we will effectively be reducing the number. We have effectively reduced the number of executives, which does mean that ultimately there is going to be significantly increased work on the executives that we have. And at the time when we're facing, when we're looking at the significant financial burdens we have and the potential of reviewing the the transformation of our services and transformation of the authority. I am a little concerned that the capacity to deliver on that in the executive area, but I'm sure officers will take that into account when they come forward with their transformation proposals. One thing I do need to speak about is the housing, and I'm absolutely delighted. I've been expressing my concern now for 5-6 years, and previous administrations failed to recognise the problem that was developing in housing. Well, I'm absolutely delighted that we're finally giving housing the recognition it deserves, and the a head of service in strategic housing who can actually focus on delivering the needs of our communities in this really important area of work. At the end of the day, for me, housing is one of the single most important thing for any family or any family, because if the roof over your head isn't safe, then you're going to have all sorts of worries and fears, and that is going to impact your day-to-day life to no end. So I'm absolutely delighted that this is being given the a head of service to specifically focus on strategic housing, and I very much welcome that report. In doing so, I'm happy to propose the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I think you're being a bit harsh on Councillor Charlie, though, as the previous administration. I think he tried his best with housing. But so we have the proposal there. We have, yes, the next one we have is Councillor Nigel. And then Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Yeah, I fully support Reen in this reorganisation. I think he's doing a sterling job and we need to support him. My only comments are I don't agree with Councillor Dilwyn. I don't think housing needs to be a Welsh essential. I'm also mindful of the fact that, you know, we don't want to narrow our gene pool. We want the right person, the best person for the job. And if Dilwyn wants to be fair to all the people in Conway, then that should be omitted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Nigel. Councillor Anne, please.
Thanks, Chair. I agree with Councillor Gareth that Reen, as our appointed Chief Exec, needs to have the authority and the backing to appoint the team and the sort of structure that he thinks will enable him to deliver on the sort of key objectives sort of set. I'm not necessarily supportive of a number of the changes, but you know, I don't think I want to go into that here. I think maybe the only one comment I would make is communication, engagement, sort of marketing is really being a disconnect and is being all over the place in terms of where it sort of sits and where it lives. And part of, you know, I do accept the point that Rena's made about it needs to be corporate. But, you know, potentially the sort of the one specific bit of feedback I would give is I would think, consider that he should actually have that team reporting directly to him, because it very much spans the whole control of the council and is always at the table, and therefore can really be looking at, you know, where we need to be spending the time and our resources. I think there's a lot of work to be done on comms and engagement as we talk every time we meet. So that's just the sort of feedback that I would give. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Anne. Reen, do you wish to comment there?
No, I appreciate that, Councillor Anne, and as you can imagine, there've been quite a few sleepless nights trying to think about different ways to get this jigsaw to work, because it's never easy, is it, to find what you want in terms of making it work. What I am sure of is that we have now a plan in place in terms of our communications. You know, by setting, we've set up an internal group which includes councillors, cabinet members, and the new head of service responsible for that marketing and comms will form an integral part of that, and having that connection with the corporate plan, I think is really important, because that is our set out our priorities as an authority. You know, we've discussed housing today, but we have a vast array of different priorities that we would like to achieve for our people out there. So take that on board, Councillor Ann, but I have full faith in that service that they'll be able to get the best out of that team. So hopefully that gives some assurance. But clearly, I fully appreciate and thankful for the comments, because, you know, as I've said, the consultation process has included a lot of different views on different areas. So I'm really appreciative of that.
Thank you very much, Reen. That was my question. In conclusion, are all the affected officers happy and content with the proposals? Or, you know, I'm thinking of staff well-being. Is everybody happy with what's being proposed?
Yeah, in terms of discussions we've had, that we've, you know, have been very positive in terms of, especially the directly affected individuals. As with any process, they have the right to appeal if they're not happy with it. So they've been given that opportunity, and as yet we haven't heard anything. So yes, it's been a very positive engagement, I would say. So hopefully that alleviates the concerns.
Thank you very much. Well, I can't see any more hands up. You'll be delighted to know. We've had a proposal from Councillor Chris. Have we a second of these recommendations? Councillor Stephen. Okay, if everyone would like to show on these proposals. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the room and online. 6 in the room and 7 online. Anybody against? Anyone abstain? No, that's carried. Well, thank you very much indeed, members, and thank you to all the officers that have taken part today. Apologies for the time, but as Councillor Nigel would be delighted to know, democracy and governance has no time limit. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Chair.